Chapter 1484. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go. The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. After Zhang Yan made his decision, he came to the abyss a few days later. He had to figure things out as soon as possible. Now that the formation gates between the sects had been completely built, it only took him about 2 hours to cross thousands of mountains and rivers and arrive in front of the Purine barrier. Xue Dingyuan was already waiting in front of the gate. After greeting each other outside, he brought him to the abyss. Although this place was underground, the entrance to the abyss was surrounded by a huge ring of stones after the great efforts of the 6 sections. These jade stones were inlaid with talisman spells. Each of them was refined by the Yuanying elders and finally refined by the people of the Dongtian. If a demon came out, it would immediately be discovered by the supervisor. At that time, the people of the Dongtian would come out to capture it with a magic tool and bring it back to be refined. In the sky above the abyss, Xue Dingyuan and the people of the 6 sects of the Dongtian had refined a floating canopy. This thing constantly rotated and shrouded the top. The inside was directly connected to the mirage of illusion. If a demon came out from this place, it would bump into the inside. If the Genin demon went inside, it would be like walking into a trap. Even if the Genin demon went inside, it wouldn't be able to get out in a short time. By then, Xue Dingyuan would have already arrived. Zhang Yan looked down and said, "This place is well arranged. I can see that you've put a lot of effort into it." Xue Dingyuan said, "It's not too much to be on guard against the demon. It's just that we don't have enough precious materials and manpower. Moreover, once the demon has intelligence, it will also find flaws and loopholes. We can stop it for now, but it may not be possible in the future. Therefore, this is only the first barrier. In the future, we need to build 8 more. When the 9 barriers are closed, no matter how cunning he is, he won't be able to come out." Zhang Yan nodded. Back in the 9 continents, the spiritual sect had fought with the demon and was very experienced. It was indeed the right decision to let the spiritual sect be the abode of the earth abyss. He said, "Sect Master Xue, what else is lacking here? I will go back and have a discussion with sect leader Reverend to allocate some precious materials for your use first." Regardless of whether it was the mountain and sea realm or the Junchen realm, offerings would be sent over every few days. The Qinsang sect and the Shaoqing sect each had 2 reverend mortal metamorphoses, and their sects were the most powerful. Naturally, they had the most treasures, but there were some that they didn't need at the moment, so they could give them to the 6 sects. Xue Dingyuan cupped his hands and said, "Then I shall thank you on behalf of the 6 sects' disciples, Daoist Zhang. These treasures and materials will be borrowed by our 6 sects, and we will return them to your sect when the time comes." Zhang Yan laughed. "There's no need to rush things. I'm afraid the mountain and sea realm is going to run into some powerful enemies. We need to focus on improving our cultivation base first. We can discuss other matters later." Xue Dingyuan agreed and said, "Because of the restrictive spell, we will have to walk for some distance. Reverend, please follow me." He led the way and descended from the sky. Before long, they landed in the middle of the pass. Zhang Yan stood there and looked around. The ground was paved with Xian jade crystals, and the night epiphyllum floated above. The walls were inlaid with clear pearls, and spiritual light flickered everywhere. When it was bright, it was like a clear mirror, and when it was dark, it was like a reflection of the void. Ignoring the dangers of the place, it was a magnificent sight. The 2 of them walked along the stone path, and after walking for about half a kilometer, they arrived at the mouth of the abyss. There was a jade staircase leading down into the depths of the abyss. At this point, Xue Dingyuan sent out a beam of spiritual light, and before long, a beam of light shot down from below. It was an old man with skin like iron, a broad chin, and a long beard. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, sect leader Xue." "Greetings, Zhang Shengzhen." Xue Dingyuan pointed at the man and said, "Reverend Zhang, this is Elder Zhen. He's in charge of everything here, and he's seen those strange things a few times." Then he turned to Zhang Shengzhen and said, "Elder Zhen, please explain in detail to Reverend Zhang. Zhenjiang Daoren responded with a yes. He pondered for a moment before saying, that thing first appeared 5 years ago. Another elder and I borrowed the heavenly karma pillar to patrol the 30th floor, and we saw an eyeball-like thing with tentacles on its body. It was mixed with several devils. The strange thing was, when the devils see living beings, they would either fight to bite or possess them, but this thing was alive and well, and it would even drive the devils to devour its own kind. I tried to attack it once or twice, but who knew that this thing was so fragile, and with just one divine art, it disappeared without a trace. After that, I ran into it a few times, and I tried to capture it, but not once did I succeed. Every time I caught it, it disappeared on its own. After listening, Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, Elder Zhen, take me to the boundaries where I saw those strange things. Zhenjiang Daoren said, yes, Reverend Zhang. Sect leader Shui, please come this way. The heavenly karma pillar was needed to go up and down the earth abyss, so the three of them headed in that direction. At this moment, Shui Dingyuan said, speaking of the heavenly karma pillar, I returned to the bottom to check on the demon's movements and unexpectedly found that the pillar is still growing. However, it has only grown a little over the years. I suspect that after it grows a little, there might be another layer at the bottom. As a mortal metamorphosis cultivator of the spirit gate, he was responsible for suppressing the devils. He had come down to take a look, and after a few visits, he discovered that something was amiss. Zhang Yan said with a smile, this shows that the mountain and sea realm is like the birth of man, still thriving and flourishing. It's still a long way from decline. It's just like the 9 continents, which were already in decline. If we hadn't left then, the disciples of the later generations would have fallen along with us. Shui Dingyuan said with a sigh, if the spirit gate and Yuxiao had stood together at that time, it would have been difficult to see the scenery beyond the heavens. Zhang Yan said, that day, Master Lingye said that the heavens beyond the heavens might not be stable. It's true that it's not stable, and there are dangers everywhere. It's difficult to move forward. However, if we cultivators are afraid of such obstacles, how can we even cultivate? Let's not talk about this. If the patriarchs of the various sects had this view, they wouldn't have come to the 9 continents to pass down their teachings. Shui Dingyuan was in deep thought. As they spoke, the 3 of them arrived in front of the heavenly karma pillar. Shui Dingyuan pointed and poured magic power into it. In an instant, the pillar shone brightly, and they walked inside. When they reappeared, they were on the 30th layer. When Elder Zhen came out, he saw that his aura was a little unstable. He quickly apologized and sat down to adjust his breathing. This was not only because of the heavenly karma pillar's influence, but also because he was traveling with 2 mortal cultivators. Even though he had the protection of the talisman that Shui Dingyuan had given him beforehand, he still couldn't withstand it. Zhang Yan didn't rush him. He talked to Shui Dingyuan, Sect Master Shui, how many layers have you set up in the abyss? Shui Dingyuan said, the lower 60 layers are under our control. It's not that we can't go further, but it's close to the turbidine sea of Qi, and there are many demons there. Unless the sect's grotto heaven is willing to stand guard there at all times, it'll be difficult to resist. If there's a genin demon coming up, I'll have to deal with it myself. However, it's been relatively stable these years, and there haven't been any abnormalities. In reality, this situation had something to do with Zhang Yan. He had captured more than 1 genin demon twice before. These demons also knew how powerful they were, so they didn't dare to go near the heavenly karma pillar, let alone go up. After a while, Elder Zhen's aura finally calmed down. He stood up and said apologetically, I've made Sect Master Shui and Zhang Shangzhen wait for a long time. This way please. Without further delay, he immediately leaped forward. Zhang Yan and Shui Dingyuan followed behind him. An hour later, they stopped at an underground. Colonel Zhang Yan pointed and said, I was patrolling here and was about to return when I saw that thing wandering around here. Zhang Yan walked over and looked around. He didn't see any strange monsters. Then, he noticed a cave in the distance and asked, where is that? Elder Zhen Daoren said, the last time I was here, there was nothing inside. Zhang Yangang focused his eyes and immediately looked through the inside and outside of the cave. However, when he looked at the shape of the cave, he felt that it was somewhat familiar. After pondering for a moment, he already knew where he came from. He said, "Let's go to the next place." Elder Zhen nodded. Then, he brought the two of them to a few more territories. It only took them a day to complete the journey. After looking at it, Zhang Yan had a rough idea of what was going on. Shui Dingyuan asked, "Did you find anything, Master Zhang?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have a rough idea, but it's hard to make a judgment before seeing such a thing. In order to verify it, I'll need to walk around." Sect Master Shui, you don't have to keep me company. Shui Dingyuan said, "Since that's the case, I'll take my leave. If you need anything, just let me know." He cupped his hands together and left with Elder Zhen. Zhang Yan, on the other hand, soared into the sky and surveyed the surrounding terrain. This time, he discovered that all the places that had seen this strange thing had one thing in common. That was, there had to be a cave dug out by the Tang clan or a nest that they had once lived in. Speaking of the Tang people, they were the aborigines of the Earth Abyss. They lived here because they were born with an eye that could restrain demons. Later, the clan was destroyed by the Genin demon and its eye was dug out. Since then, the clan was completely wiped out. Due to the effect of the eye, he tried to search for it after learning about it, but to no avail. Now, he suspected that the eye was related to the Tang people's eye. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared in the boundaries where the clan used to live, and it just so happened to be able to capture the demon. There couldn't be such a coincidence in the world. Taking a step back, even if it wasn't, there must be some connection between the two. Hence, he came down to search for it. He only needed to go to these places. As for how to find it, it was easy. The Tang people were living creatures, so they must have their habits and characteristics. Most of their caves were near the rivers that existed in the Earth Abyss since ancient times. This was the most obvious direction. After he finished looking, he released dozens of flying swords to search around. He didn't find anything in the first few days, but after searching for nearly a month and walking up and down several floors, he finally found something. He saw an eyeball the size of a millstone floating in the air, surrounded by seemingly illusory tentacles. It didn't move very fast. Because he knew that this thing was fragile, he did not rashly grab it, but observed from behind. He found that it was very similar to the Tang people's eye, except that it was slightly bigger. However, it had lived for many years and became a living creature, so there must be some changes. After sensing it again, he could already confirm that this eye had nothing to do with the evil spirit. It should be the Tang people's eye that was born from the spiritual opportunity. However, whether it could restrain the demon remained to be verified. If it still existed, he could try to capture it, and after the sacrificial refining, he could give it to his disciples. Maybe in the future, they could use it to fight against the sky demon. Chapter 1485. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go. TalkNet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Zhang Yan stared at the eye for a long time and found that its movements were slow. Usually, it could only move about half a mile in a day. It was no wonder that he could find traces of it near the Tang people's lair. When this thing was motionless, it would retract its spiritual light, making it look like a stubborn rock. Normally, it would extend its tentacles outside its body, and after a period of time, it could attract a few devils over and successfully restrain them. The devils that came down would then search for living beings to devour according to its will. What was interesting was that it was precisely because Ling Men's strength and influence had gradually extended to the lower levels of the abyss. They used formations to transform the mountains and rivers here and brought many living creatures to the depths of the abyss, allowing many birds and beasts to multiply and strengthen here. Just now, this eye had the flesh and blood of living creatures to eat. With its current form, this thing could already be called an eye demon. However, this eye had been immersed in the depths of the abyss for a long time. It was infected by vitality and bathed in spiritual light. At the same time, it had gradually developed its own spirituality. At the same time, it was already closely integrated with the chi dynamic here. It was very inappropriate to bring it out rashly as its body would most likely be unable to bear it. Previously, Elder Zhen had failed several times because of this reason. This method was easy to solve. It could not go to the outside world because it had not been born for a long time. Its foundation was weak and its body was not strong enough. Here, it only needed a few things to make up for it. Zhang Yan raised his hand and used his finger as a pen to write a letter in the air. With a flick of his finger, it turned into a ray of spiritual light and flew out. Not long after, an elder walked out of the heavenly grace pillar and came to where he was. He presented a pouch and said respectfully, "What else do you need, Lord Zhen? I can go and get it." Zhang Yan took it and examined it. Seeing that he was not lacking anything he needed, he said, "These are enough. Go, and thank sect leader Shui for me." The elder bowed and left. Zhang Yan took out a beast-subduing collar from the pouch and shook it lightly. With a flash of spiritual light, 5 demons ran out and fled in panic under the pressure of his chi dynamic. This immediately attracted the attention of the eye demon and it woke up from its hibernation. Its tentacles swayed and several demons flew up and attached themselves to these demons. These demons were extremely ferocious and tyrannical. If left unchecked, they could devour all living beings within a radius of several thousand miles. However, under the influence of the demon, they tore at each other, and after half an hour, all of them died from severe injuries. The eye demon slowly moved to the front of the demon's corpse, and then began to eat heartily. After eating, it could be seen that its body had grown at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its originally pale eyes were now bloodshot, and it looked especially ferocious. Although it looked terrifying, in reality, it was still very fragile. Without the devil, any low-level cultivator could easily kill it. For the next month, Zhang Yan kept feeding it flesh and blood. Every 10 days, the demon would transform. In the end, its body became smaller, but its tentacles were longer and denser. It could summon no less than 100 demons. Seeing this, he felt that it was time to bring this demon out. With a thought, a bolt of lightning shot out and scattered the demons. Then, he took out a funnel-shaped Dharma artifact. He shone it in the air and took the eye demon inside. He hit a few more talisman on it and it became smaller and smaller. Finally, it fell into his palm. It was soaked with the essence blood of a fierce demon, enough for the demon to last for 3 to 5 years. When that time came, he would take it out. If it could withstand external energy, then it would be fine. If it still couldn't, then he would leave it for a few more years, and with the help of magic power, it would be fine. If it had the effect of restraining the demons after refining, then he could catch a few more. However, he didn't need to do this anymore. He could just go back and tell one of his disciples to take care of it. After keeping the Dharma artifact, he came back to the abyss with the help of the heavenly karma pillar. He bid farewell to Shui Dingyuan and left the turbidine barrier. He went through the formation door and returned to the Dragon Abyss Sea Marsh. When he sat down in his cave, he summoned Jingyu and gave him the Dharma artifact. After giving him some instructions, he entered the Xianyuan small world and continued to meditate. In the blink of an eye, another 50 years had passed. Zhang Yan was sitting and observing. He felt that his divine qi was lively and eager to move. He knew that the time was right and the time to enter the next gate was right in front of him. He let go of everything and let the qi in his body surge. After a long time, he suddenly heard a loud sound, as if the heavens and earth were being split apart. With the help of this, his divine will extended outwards and smoothly entered the second stage realm. At this moment, he saw all his past experiences and all the people and things that he had come into contact with along the way. In his eyes, these were all incomparably obvious marks. Humans born between heaven and earth were bound to be related to all things in the world. Although he entered the mortal realm and became a heaven on his own, it was like walking on the beach. There would always be traces left behind. If there was an enemy who was in the second gate or a cultivator who had cultivated above the second gate, it would not be difficult for them to see these traces. In the end, they might even know him better than he did. Now that he knew the flaws, he would not leave them behind. He immediately swept his divine qi and wiped them clean. Thus, the traces of him entering the world were completely erased. From now on, what was left were only memories in people's hearts. The real past only existed in one's own cognition. This meant that anyone who wanted to use supernatural means to find out where he came from would only get a plausible answer in the end. Or it would just be a cloud of fog. After everything was done, Zhang Yan felt his body lighten, as if he had been freed from some kind of shackles. He could see that although his past was constantly increasing, it was constantly moving away from him under the extension of the divine will. This process was just like flowing water, without any interruption. Therefore, people who were not on the same level as him could not hurt him at all. This was because the other party was always looking at the me in the past, and not the me in the present. After entering the second realm, it was like entering mortal shedding. Although there were no signs of grandeur in the outside world, there was an earth-shattering change on the inside. And because he was using both qi and strength at the same time, his true combat ability was not comparable to that of ordinary second-realm cultivators. It could be said that his combat ability had greatly improved. After carefully observing the changes in his body, he slowly retracted his cultivation. He thought to himself, now that my cultivation is enough to protect myself, if there is nothing in the outside world, I should find a time to go beyond the heavens to find the root fruit of the strength path. In the Yunshu realm, above the sky of the azure world, four upper mortal shedding cultivators were discussing how to defend against evil spirits. The head of the virtuous perching water pavilion, Yin Liang, looked exhausted. With his cultivation, it was impossible for something like this to happen. This could only be due to the extreme exhaustion of his qi. The other three looked at him with sympathy. The latter used more than 1,000 years to cultivate a primordial doppelganger. Its mana was almost equal to his own. Ever since he had this ability, he even had more confidence in speaking. He did not expect that he would be destroyed by the evil spirits because of a moment of carelessness. The head of the Great Might Heavenly Palace, Ming Xianling, asked with concern, "Are you all right, fellow Taoist?" After Yin Liang was injured, he had been in seclusion to recuperate. Just now, he came out. He said with a solemn face, "My primordial essence is heavily damaged. I'm afraid I can't fight for now. If I don't rest for 1,000 years, it will be difficult for me to recover my qi." The three frowned. This was a crucial time in the battle against the evil spirits. They were already weak, and without a mortal shedding cultivator to hold the fort, the power they could mobilize was even more limited. Ming Xianling said, "Previously, when your doppelganger was damaged, you immediately went into seclusion. We did not even know the specific details, so I did not dare to make any big moves in these years. Now that we have gathered, I wonder if it is convenient for you to tell us the reason." Yin Liang looked at the three and said in a low voice, "This time, it was a traitor. That person is one of my disciples." This was not a random accusation. Extraterrestrial evil spirits could reincarnate into the world, and as their lifespan increased, they would slowly recover their original memories. As for exactly how he accomplished it, they still hadn't figured it out up until now. It was simply impossible to guard against. It was just that after he obtained the help of that person, he hadn't succeeded again, and that was why he'd been careless. The three looked at each other and asked anxiously, "Where is that person?" Yin Liang sneered and said, "I haven't alerted him yet. He has schemed against me once. If I don't return the favor, how can I be satisfied?" Divine Elegance Doc Master Yujirue was puzzled. With that person around, how can such a thing happen? Fairy Mountain's Lord Yinmu said indifferently, "Maybe after losing more than 10 void realms, that person is dissatisfied with me." Everyone's heart trembled. At the same time, there was a trace of fear. That person was their foundation. If they did not obtain his support, then everything would collapse. Ming Xianling asked solemnly, "Mountain Lord Yin, you have the most contact with that person. Let me ask you, what should we do next?" Master Yu and Master Yin also turned their gazes over. Yin Mu said, unless we take back the small realms we lost and make up for the lost spiritual opportunity. However, this is still the bottom line. Only by occupying more void realms will that person be satisfied. Ming Xianling shook his head and said, "This is easier said than done. Now that the battle at Pingchuan boundary is in a stalemate, each sect has sent more than 10 elephant realm cultivators over, but they can only barely hold on. It is not impossible to fill in more people, but if there are any losses, it cannot be made up for in a short period of time." Pingchuan boundary's spiritual opportunity was abundant, and it was ranked among the top among the many lower realms of Yunshu realm. They also attached great importance to it, but the evil spirits had strange methods. They were extremely afraid of falling into another trap, so they could only try their best to maintain the current situation and did not dare to do anything else. If they did not solve this problem, they would not dare to do anything else. Yin Xian said indifferently, "I still stand by my previous opinion. With just our Yunshu realm, we cannot stop the evil spirits. Only by allying with people of the same path can we open up the situation." Yu Jirue sighed and said, "Of course we want to, but the news has long been released. It is just that after so many years, no one from the void realms has appeared. Obviously, they are not willing to help us." Ming Xianling pondered and said, "That might be because we have our pride and some other thoughts, so we have not really asked for help." He raised his head and said seriously, "Fellow Taoists, in this time of danger, to protect our foundation, we should let go of what we should." Chapter 1486. After the four Reverend Mortal Shu decided to ask for help, they sent it out in the form of an edict. Of course, the wording was very tactful, and it did not look like a request for help at all. This was not because they cared about their reputation, but because they did not want their disciples to lose the morale to fight the enemy. They believed that if there were people from beyond the heavens present, they would understand the true meaning of the edict. In fact, there was another advantage to doing this. The evil monsters would definitely receive the news, and they could not be sure if there would be people coming to help, nor would they know how strong the reinforcements would be. As expected, the four of them soon discovered that the evil monsters' attacks had slowed down a little. Clearly, they had some misgivings. Previously, the evil monsters had been constantly attacking, and the Yunshu realm had been too tired to take a breather. Now, they could take advantage of this time to adjust themselves a little. Sima Quan had been hiding in the inner realm, and when he received the news, he immediately reported it to the mountain and sea realm. The reply he received was that he should keep an eye on things for a while longer, and not act rashly, and wait for the right opportunity. After receiving this instruction, he did not go up to make contact with the people of the Yunshu realm, but continued to wait and see. Personally, he was more inclined to this decision, because compared to 150 years ago, the situation in the Yunshu realm had not changed much. They had not been able to retake the small realms that they had lost, but they had not lost any more. This made him certain that the Yunshu realm was not at the point where it could not hold out any longer. In the Azure world, to the southeast was a vast expanse of water, with countless islands. This was where the virtuous perching water pavilion was located, and one of the more famous were the 300 water dwellings. Almost all of the water dwellings were disciples of the sect master Yin Liang, but there were actually only 5 of them who were truly trusted. These people occupied the 5 best lakes in the sect, and Nguando was one of them. He was usually a little dull and did not speak much, but it was because of this that Yin Liang liked to keep him by his side. Who would have thought that he was the reincarnation of an evil monster? He was the one who had leaked the news that Yin Liang's clone's whereabouts had been exposed. However, after the incident, Yin Liang did not ask him anything, as if nothing had happened. But he knew very well that Yin Liang could not possibly not suspect him, and even thought that he was certain. However, he acted as usual. As long as Yin Liang did not take the initiative to expose him, he was happy to stay. As an evil monster, he did not care much about his life. Even if his physical body was killed, as long as the spirit in the great imperial light was not destroyed, he could still borrow a body to be reborn. Of course, the prerequisite was that he could do what he wanted to do. After all, there were countless spirits like him who were waiting to be reincarnated. They wanted to eat the flesh and blood to eat to the flesh, to strengthen themselves. The greater the contribution, the greater, the better the spirit, the greater the value of the of. While he was meditating, a boy's voice came from outside the door. Island Master, Ding Zhenren is here. He has been waiting outside for a while. And good say of this of an. To to, he. Not long after, a handsome man walked in. He was Yin Liang's other disciple, Ding Changhen. As soon as he entered, he sighed and said, "Senior brother and, oh, senior brother, why didn't you run away?" And Guanda looked at him and asked, "Why should I run?" Without waiting for his greeting, Ding Chang'an sat down on the praying mat in front of him and said confidently, "Why do you have to hide it, senior brother? Teacher wasn't harmed by you, so how could he have lost that clone?" She then looked at him with a burning gaze. "What do you want to do? Maybe I can help." Instead, he asked curiously, "You all seem to know who I am?" Cauldron Chang'an spat, "Is there anyone who doesn't know?" And Guanda said, "Since you know, then you should also understand that I can't escape." The Cauldron Chang'an retreated a little and pointed at him with a smile, saying, "Don't think that I don't know. It's just your physical bodies that can't escape. You're still here, so there must be some other purpose." He then transmitted his voice, "In any case, we're brothers. I've said that I'll help you. Now that teacher doesn't seem to be guarding against you, I don't know how many arrangements have been made in the dark. Without an insider, you won't be able to move an inch." Instead of answering, Nguanda asked, "What do you want?" Cauldron Chang'an moved forward and transmitted his voice, "I don't want anything else. I just want to be like you, senior brother." "Like me?" Nguanda looked at him and said, "It seems like you know something." Cauldron Chang'an said frankly, "There are many old bamboo slips in the scripture cave, and they're all about strange things that have been abandoned by people. I happen to be interested in these things, but who would have thought that there would be some descriptions of evil spirits in them? I don't know which wise sage wrote them down, but I'm afraid that they didn't dare to write them out in the open and only dared to mix them in these miscellaneous writings. Living people could also become evil spirits, but this required the guidance of evil spirits. After becoming such an evil spirit, as long as there was a bit of the original spirit, they would be immortal, which was much better than cultivating hard. However, this was also because his lifespan was coming to an end, and he didn't want to be guided after reincarnation. Coincidentally, there was such an opportunity in front of him, so he decided to take this path. And Guanda said playfully, "Teacher has treated you well. Why are you doing this?" Cauldron Chang'an knocked on the table in front of him and said, "Teacher is indeed a good leader, but he's not a worthy teacher. Look at how he treats third senior brother, and how he treats us." At this point, he smiled disdainfully. "Does he think that we don't know that third senior brother is his only remaining descendant? I don't care for the position of the future leader, but third senior brother has obtained far more cultivation resources than the others in the same sect. If he can really win against the others, I'll be convinced. However, he's obviously not talented, but he still managed to secure his position by relying on his bloodline. I can't stand it." Cauldron Chang'an was not moved by this. He said calmly, "Don't look for excuses. You want to be like us, but that's because you're selfish. It's useless to say these things in front of me, and I don't care about it. As long as you can help me, I'll give you a chance." Cauldron Chang'an's expression brightened. He said, "Senior brother, please speak." Cauldron Chang'an said, "Before we speak, we can sign a contract. If you don't trust me, I won't trust you either." Cauldron Chang'an said happily, "Even if senior brother doesn't mention it, I'll still mention it." The two of them signed the contract on the spot. Cauldron Chang'an took the contract and looked at it. He was finally relieved. After signing the contract, even an otherworldly demon would be bound by it. Disobeying one's teacher was not a small crime. If it was exposed, he would definitely die, and his soul would be destroyed. There was no turning back now that he had done this. Cauldron Chang'an also revealed his purpose. He said, "I'm staying here because I want to find someone." "Oh, is this person also from your sect?" That's right, Cauldron Chung then said, you don't need to know the details. As long as you find this person, I'll agree to all your conditions. Cauldron Chung then said, may I know where this person is? Cauldron Chung then said, if I knew, why would I look for you? Cauldron Chung then was startled. He said, senior brother, are you joking? There are so many people in this world. If we don't know for sure, how would we know who this person is and where he is? Cauldron Chung then thought for a while and said, there are 2 red lines under this person's tongue, and his life is destined to not be simple. Cauldron Chung then frowned. It was still not easy to find the person. The red lines under the tongue was not a big deal. With his mana, he could see through a person's body. As for the person's life, he did not mention it. Once an evil spirit awakens its memory, it would cause trouble even if it had nothing to do. However, this clue was better than nothing. He thought for a while and came up with a few ideas. Then, he looked forward and asked curiously, I have something to ask you, senior brother. Before you awakened your memory, your life was not much different from the others. In just a few years, you've transformed. Could it be that the friendship between fellow disciples, the kindness between master and disciple, and the ethics of kinship have become worthless? Cauldron Chang's expression did not change at all. He only said, when you become one of us, you will understand that these are all useless things. Only the true self is what we seek. The body is just like the clothes on your body. If you wear it, you can just change it. Cauldron Chung pondered for a while and said, what is the true self? Cauldron Chung said coldly, you don't have to ask about this anymore. Even if you sign the contract with me, you are still a cultivator. Cauldron Chung said, oh. Have you met many cultivators? Cauldron Chung sneered and said, we have destroyed the Jia Kong and slaughtered countless cultivators. Don't think that your Yun Shu realm is special. You can only rely on a talisman left behind by your predecessors to keep us out. Even the old owner of the talisman has been killed by us. How can you fight against me? Cauldron Chung was very surprised. This was the first time he knew that the old owner of the talisman had died in the hands of an evil spirit. He could not help but feel lucky that he had taken the right step. Otherwise, how could he survive alone when the Yun Shu realm was overturned? With a long laugh, he stood up and said, I will try my best to find this person. He took a step forward and said, one more thing. Even if Senior Marshal Brother is no longer here, I hope I can fulfill this promise. Cauldron Chung knew what he meant. He looked straight at him and said, don't worry. As long as you can do it, I will definitely fulfill my promise. Cauldron Chung cupped his hands and said, then I will take my leave now. He walked out of the cave abode and guessed that this person must be an important figure among the evil spirits. He might even be involved in some big secret. Otherwise, there would be no need to spend so much effort to find him. However, this had nothing to do with him. He only needed to find this person and achieve his goal. But not long after he came out, a boy said, Cauldron Jinren, the headmaster invites you over. Cauldron Chung said calmly, lead the way. After following the boy for a while, he saw the clouds in the sky parting, revealing a cave dwelling in the sky. He flew up into the air and walked into the room. He saw Yin Liang half lying on the white jade couch and asked him, how did the discussion go? Cauldron Chung bowed and said, Master, I have already won his trust. I just had to use some tactics. Yin Liang waved his hand and stopped him from continuing. He said with a stern look, I don't care how you did it. You just need to keep him under control for now. I will have my own ways to deal with him in the future. Visit website. Chapter 1487. Zhang Yan spent some time to make some arrangements in the mansion. Although he had the intention of going out to look for the strength Dao root fruit, he did not immediately set off. There were 2 reasons for this. Firstly, his own cultivation had only just improved. It turned out that the cultivation method was deduced by himself. At this point, there had already been an earth-shattering change, and he needed to evolve it again to make it more compatible with himself. Secondly, he always felt that there was something that he had not paid attention to, as if he had missed out on something important. This was not simple. At his level, everything that he had seen in the past was vivid in his mind. It was impossible for him to forget anything. The more it was like this, the more it showed that this thing was not simple. It was even to the extent that he could not pry into it at will, so he was obscured by the mysteries of heaven. He thought about it. Since he could not use normal methods to find out, he could only wait for the opportunity to come. At that time, he would naturally understand what it was. This was just like when ordinary people searched for something but could not find it. However, when they did not deliberately seek it, it would appear in front of them inadvertently. Other than these two things, he still needed to observe the situation in Yunshu world. Therefore, he felt that he should stay for a period of time. It would not be too late to decide on his journey after the situation was more or less stabilized. He raised his head and looked down the cliff. There was a faintly discernible spiritual light, as if it was made from starlight. It was innumerable strands of spiritual light that were intertwined together. However, it was not arranged randomly, but it contained some kind of strange pattern. Up until this point, the world-guarding treasure had already begun to take shape. However, he didn't know how long it would take for it to be fully refined. Fortunately, at this step, he didn't have to constantly watch over it, and he just had to find some time to pay attention to it. With a thought, he came out of the Xianyuan small world and sat in the main hall. He dismissed the servants and took out the talisman of the Duzhen Hall Master. He activated all the restrictions in this place so that not a single strand of qi could leak out. Then, he took out the sense jade that he obtained from the Scarlet Earth Star. That day, he was only focused on cultivation and did not have time to pay attention to this thing. Now, it was a good time to take a look. This sense jade could make wild demons have spirituality. This was actually not simple. Although cultivators could also enlighten demons with spirituality, the two were actually different. Usually, cultivators would pour a strand of their own consciousness into the consciousness of the demon they wanted to enlighten so that it could speak and walk. However, this generation was limited by nature. Even if they could cultivate and enter the Tao in the future, their achievements would be extremely low. Therefore, in many cases, cultivators like this would throw it away after using it. Even if Xinci brought it along, it would only be a servant to serve her. However, the will jade was very different. It was a fundamental change. For example, the feather fur coat was originally just an ordinary little demon. There were many of its kind on the Crimson Blaze planet, and there was nothing special about them. However, after obtaining the will jade, he was able to escape from the hands of the Taoist heavenly abode after cultivating for only a few thousand years. Although that was just an accident, it was still commendable. Based on this result, as long as this item was placed in Tianqing Hall, it would only take a few hundred years for it to breed a large group of rare birds and beasts. However, he still did not know much about this item. He needed to verify it a few times before he could make a decision. He held it in his hand and looked at it for a while. He thought to himself, this sense jade has its own consciousness. I can't force it. I need to find a way to guide it. His mind moved silently. Not long after, an ordinary mountain rock flew in from outside. It was about the size of a fist. He shook his sleeve again and set up a formation in the middle of the hall. He placed the rock inside and at the same time, he placed the sense jade in it. Generally speaking, putting aside the strange beasts that were favored by the heavens and earth, based on their potential, the birds and beasts that were the easiest to be enlightened were the birds and beasts of the land, followed by the aquatic creatures, then the vermin and the grass and wood elves. Lastly, the ones that were at the bottom were the metal and stone elves. If there were no accidents, even if they were to bathe in spiritual vigor for billions of years, there might not be any changes. There was actually another way. If the metal and stone were shaped by a skilled craftsman, after interacting with people for a long time, they could also develop some spirituality. However, this mountain rock had not been sculpted. It was just a piece of stubborn rock. He wanted to give it a try and see if the will jade could also change it. He took out another spell and summoned the formation spirit. He said, "Take this rock out of the formation once a day and put it back after 4 hours." This was to let the sense jade know that if it wanted to get out of the formation, it could only find a way through this rock, just like what it did on the red scorching earth star. The formation spirit bowed and said, "I understand." After Zhang Yan gave the order, he did not pay attention to it anymore. He continued to sit on the couch to deduce the cultivation method. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. When he woke up from his meditation, he looked towards the formation. However, he found that in just a few years, there was a change in the rock. There was a stone heart the size of a grain of sand growing inside. Although it was only a little, it was extremely dazzling in his eyes. Unknowingly, he was a little surprised. This was a change in the nature of the stone. What was even more extraordinary was that after it had the stone heart, the stone had already begun to absorb spiritual energy from the outside world. If this continued, it would probably become a psychic jade stone after 100 years. After a few thousand years, it might even be able to try to transform. Most of the monsters of metal and stone in the world, which one of them did not achieve it after billions of years? However, after thinking about it, it made sense. When the sense jade was still sealed, it could only rely on a little leakage of chi dynamic to illuminate the feather coat. Now that there was no cover, the effect was even more extraordinary. In the past, the sense jade itself was not without consumption, but it was only a little. If it was not someone of his realm, he would not be able to notice it. He nodded secretly. The person who could refine this treasure was really amazing. This item might not be of much use to ordinary disciples, but it was extremely useful to mortal cultivators like him who could fly to other worlds. If he brought it to other worlds, as long as it settled in the world where there were living creatures for thousands of years, he could create a large number of subordinates who would listen to his orders. This was much easier than imparting techniques and establishing a sect. The most important thing was that there was no fear of loss. Even if all of them died, as long as the sense jade still existed, he could create them again. From this point of view, this was probably the original intention of creating this item. He changed his mind again and said, "Such an amazing item, if this item is compatible with my realm protection treasure, what will happen?" Then, he shook his head and smiled. This was just a thought. Not to mention that he had already deduced all the steps of refining a Dharma treasure clearly, he couldn't be at ease using it on his own Dharma treasure before he figured out the origin of this object. He waved his hand and removed the formation. He put the sense jade back into his sleeve and thought, "I'll leave it here for now. In the future, when I go to outer space, it might come in handy." After packing up, he settled his mind and sat still in the hall, continuing to deduce techniques. After sitting for 5 years, the 2 realms dial on the table suddenly made a sound. He opened his eyes and channeled his mana into it. Sima Quan's figure appeared in the spiritual light and bowed to him, saying, "Greetings, Master." Zhang Yan nodded and returned the greeting, saying, "Jinren Sima, is there any change in the Yunshu realm again?" Sima Quan said, "Not long ago, there was another edict sent from the realm. However, the original edict was written in the eroded text, and with my cultivation, I could not read it. Since it is so serious, I think the matter is not simple, so I would like to ask Jinren to take a look." As he said this, he took out a letter from his sleeve and opened it in front of him. Zhang Yan looked at it. It was indeed written in the eroded text and was not complicated. It was just that the realm of a cultivator was not high enough, so it was difficult for him to understand it. After some deduction, he read it smoothly. This was another letter asking for help. It said that the evil monsters were attacking fiercely, and the Yunshu realm could not withstand the danger. It begged for help from fellow cultivators from outer space. In the end, it also said that the evil monsters were the common enemy of all cultivators, and only by killing them could the universe be clear. After reading it, he said, "Has there been any change in the Yunshu realm recently?" Sima Quan said, "There is no big change, but not long ago, another lower realm was lost. The inner realm seemed to be in a panic for a while, but it soon calmed down." Zhang Yan pondered for a while. The real situation in the Yunshu realm was not as simple as losing a lower realm. The real situation should be more serious, otherwise, there was no need to send out such an edict. It was likely that the disciples under them knew the real situation and lost their fighting spirit. But in that case, could it be that the evil monsters can't read the eroded text? He changed his mind and asked Sima Quan a few more questions about the layout of the Yunshu realm. After listening, he shook his head. He didn't know why, but the people of this realm seemed to have no intention of fighting back. They were just defending and letting the evil monsters attack. As the saying goes, a prolonged defense is bound to be lost. As time went on, mistakes were bound to appear. However, if the Yunshu realm was completely occupied by the evil monsters, that would not be a good thing. From what he knew, the evil monsters were invading spiritual opportunity everywhere. They were very aggressive, and once they were done with this place, they would most likely change their target. Although they might not come to the mountain and sea realm, they couldn't rely on luck. This was especially true when the sects of the 9 continents were facing the threat of that almighty being. They had to expand outwards, and it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't run into him in the future. The only way was to find a way to keep the evil monsters here while the mountain and sea realm slowly built up its strength. That was the right thing to do. Having made up his mind, he used his divine will to go to that mysterious place and inform sect leader Qin and the other reverend mortals of the matter. He also suggested that Reverend Sima try to get in touch with the evil monsters. As for the manpower he needed, he could get it from the Junchen realm. Although the Junchen realm had been through many battles, there were still many true monarchs. Most of them had already signed the Dharma indenture, and were now completely under the command of the mountain and sea realm. This was a very powerful force. Other than Rao Jifeng and Bei Xiangtong, no one else knew where the mountain and sea realm was. Even if they were plotted against, or if they were accidentally possessed by the gargoyles, they wouldn't have to worry about the mountain and sea realm being exposed. The only thing that could possibly be exposed was the existence of the smoke-wavy realm. As the lower realm of the Junchen realm, almost every true monarch knew how to get there. However, that place was now occupied by that almighty true Yang expert, and if the evil monsters were to follow him there, it would be very interesting. Chapter 1488. Zhang Yan waited for the meeting to end before he withdrew his spirit. Sima Quan was still waiting there. Fortunately, with the communication of the spirit, no matter how long it took, what the outside world felt was only an instant. Therefore, he did not know that in this instant, the few spiritual masters of mortal slew had reached a consensus. Zhang Yan said, "Spiritual Master Sima, I have talked with the few spiritual masters. Now that I have given you the identity of an emissary, you can try to get in touch with the cultivators of Yunshu realm. Tell them that we, the 9 continents, are willing to help because we are all cultivators. However, you have to pay attention to a few places. You must make sure that they tell me everything they know about the evil monsters without holding anything back. After that, discuss with them about the matter of returning Jiaohua realm. If they agree, then we can continue the discussion. However, you have to know the limits." Sima Quan knew that getting back Jiaohua was only the bottom line. It was best to take this chance to get more lower realms. He thought for a while and said, "May I ask spiritual masters, what can the 9 continents offer as a bargaining chip this time?" Zhang Yan said, "If the matter is settled, then the 9 continents will prepare to send cultivators of Junchen realm to help." "Do you understand?" Sima Quan understood. Sima Quan understood tacitly. He had hidden in Junchen Jia for hundreds of years, so he immediately knew what was going on. He said, "Sima understands." Then, Sage Zhang and everyone, please wait for Sima's reply. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Spiritual Master Sima, you have to be careful. You have the body of the Sky Devil. If you walk to the front of the stage, you have to be careful when facing the cultivators of Yunshu realm. However, you have to be wary of the evil monsters. I will pass you an etching rune seal. When the cultivators of Yunshu realm see it, they will know your identity." After that, he drew a talisman in the air. Sima Quan did not know what it meant, but he memorized it. He then said, Jinren Zhang, Jinren Yun is still here. Much of the information that was sent here was also obtained by him. He asked me to ask if there is anything that needs to be done in the sect. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, tell him that the Jiehua domain was originally the home of his Cloud Whale clan, and we will take it back sooner or later. He has already been in the Yunshu domain for a long time, and has made great contributions. I will make the decision for Zihong here. From now on, he will no longer be an in-name disciple, but a disciple of my Xianyuan branch. Sima Quan said solemnly, Sima will pass on the message. Zhang Yan, I may go into seclusion for a period of time. If Taoist Master Sima has something to say, you can discuss it with Meng Zhen. Sima Quan said yes and said a few more words. Then, he dispersed the spiritual light and put away the dual realm dial. Just now, although they were separated by the dial, he could feel that Zhang Yan seemed to be different from before. However, after a while, when he thought about it again, he found that it was somewhat wrong. That feeling was not as strong as before. His heart shuddered. This kind of situation should not have happened to him. He could not help but guess that this person's cultivation had improved again. At the same time, he also thought, now that my cultivation has reached a juncture, there are many demons among the evil spirits. If I can find some and refine them, they might help me achieve success. Thinking about this, he immediately sat down and circulated his cultivation to observe. Although the demon had swallowed his clone last time, it was actually just a strand of his demonic thoughts. Not only did he not suffer any losses because of it, he even followed that strand of qi and found the location of the demon. At best, this demon was similar to the Yuanying cultivators. However, after coming to Yunshu realm, it had continuously caused chaos in a few small sects, and its strength had greatly increased. He did not refine this demon before because he was prepared to follow the clues and see if he could catch the evil spirit that had arrived earlier. However, after waiting for a long time, he found that this demon's actions were messy and did not seem to be under someone's orders. In fact, he did not even see it interact with anyone. Thus, he boldly deduced that this demon might have been deliberately placed in Yunshu realm by the evil spirits to cause chaos in this realm. Apart from that, there was no other purpose. It seems that whether or not these evil spirits can restrain the demon will have to wait and see. However, it does not matter. This time, there should be more than one demon. Once I find them one by one, I will be able to investigate clearly. Perhaps it was very difficult for others to find demons, but as a heavenly demon, it was very easy for him. However, he still needed to be careful. Similarly, if the Genin demon wanted to find him, there might not be much trouble. The bronze mask passed down by Grandmaster Ling Yu could only be used for a moment of emergency, but it might not be able to avoid all dangers. The person he was currently possessing was a Yuanying elder of Yanguang Mountain, one of the 12 forces of Yunshu realm. His name was Bai Wenjiu. Because of this person's eccentric personality, he usually did not get along with his fellow sect members, and his lifespan was gradually coming to an end. Thus, he was stationed in the White Realm. Apart from the monthly routine of replying to the sect, he had almost no contact with them. To him, there was no more suitable candidate to possess. After he made his decision, he came out of the cave abode. A boy standing at the door asked, Jinren, are you going out to visit a friend? Sima Quan said, yes, I'm going out for a while. On the way, I need to pick some spiritual flowers and herbs in the mountains. Prepare a flying carriage for me. If there are any questions from the sect, just answer truthfully. The boy said, yes, sir. After a while, Sima Quan boarded the flying carriage and headed to the place where the demon was hiding. 2 days later, he arrived at a misty, picturesque forest by the riverside. From the map, it seemed to be the base of a small sect. Looking down from the clouds, he saw people coming and going in an endless stream. There was even the sound of singing and laughter, and it was peaceful and serene. However, he knew that although everything seemed normal on the surface, in reality, everyone had long been infected by the devil qi. It was just that the demon had not refined the essence chi it had swallowed previously, so it had not done anything yet. Once it succeeded, it would immediately sweep this place clean. At that time, from top to bottom, no one would be able to escape this calamity. It would take at least more than 10 days for the demon to come out. He did not have the mood to wait any longer. He turned into a gust of chilly wind and floated down, straight into the ground. The demon seemed to have sensed something, but the difference between the two was too great. Before it could react, it was absorbed into Sima Quan's body and instantly refined into the purest essence chi. Although the demon was dead, if the devil chi in the outside world was not extinguished, it would use the cultivator's essence chi as nourishment. As time passed, a new demon would be born. Sima Quan pondered for a moment. There was no guarantee that the evil spirits would have a way to investigate the movements of these demons, so it was better to get rid of them all. Thus, he circled around and collected all the devil chi. Then, he turned into a cloud of turbid smoke and fled. The cultivators in this small sect only felt a gust of chilly wind blow past, and they all shuddered at the same time. A few days later, everyone in the sect, regardless of their cultivation, had their vitality greatly damaged. They invited an expert to take a look, but they did not know what was going on. They were afraid that it was the work of evil spirits, so they could only reluctantly give up on this place and move the sect elsewhere. Sima Quan had been traveling outside for 3 months and had taken care of more than 10 demons, but none of them were related to evil spirits. He felt that he would not be able to find any useful clues for the time being, so he turned west. 3 days later, he arrived at the bottom of a high cliff. This was the place where the door to the lower realm was. Yun Jiang was currently staying here with Zhan Mo Ping. Zhan Mo Ping had relied on the merits of exterminating the vicious demons to successfully enter the Yuanying realm. Now, he was willing to become the realm guardian elder. Unlike in the past, this position was now extremely dangerous, and many people were afraid that they would be targeted by evil spirits. It turned out that some of the realm guardian elders had also requested to be transferred. Under these circumstances, he had successfully ascended to this position. He had no choice but to do this. The senior and junior brothers in the sect were not on good terms with him, and Elder Hong had never given up on finding trouble with him. In order to protect himself, he could only make this choice. At this moment, he saw a white-haired Daoran come in from outside. Looking at his aura, he was also of Yuanying cultivation. He bowed and said, "Where did this fellow Taoist come from?" Sima Quan reported the name and origin of this body and said, "Daoran is going to refine a treasure recently, and there is a precious material called the welcome incense wood. It can only be produced by the Wenhai realm that fellow Taoist guards. I wonder if fellow Taoist has a collection here." One of the important reasons why the realm guardian elder was valued was that he had gotten his hands on many precious materials and external medicines that were offered from the lower realm. If it wasn't for the evil spirits plundering, who would be willing to give them up? Although Zhan Mo Ping felt like he was sitting on the mouth of a volcano every day, he had never worried about external things like before. He smiled and said, "I have quite a few here. Fellow Taoist can follow me to the storehouse to choose. If you see something suitable, you can take it." On the other side, Yun Jiang was floating in the heavenly lake on the cliff. At this moment, a voice sounded in her mind, "Fellow Taoist Yun, is it convenient for you to speak?" Yun Jiang's body moved slightly and she said, "Is this Taoist Sima?" A blurry spirit light appeared in the lake and gathered into an indistinct figure. Sima Quan said, "Taoist Yun, I'm here to tell you a piece of news. Since you've sent a lot of useful information back to the realm, Taoist Zhang has already made the decision on behalf of Taoist Wei to take you in as a disciple of the Xianyuan faction. You're no longer an in-name disciple." When Yun Jiang heard this, she was extremely excited. Waves surged in the lake, causing Zhan Mo Ping to look over in confusion. Yun Jiang quickly calmed her emotions and sent a mental message back. She said gratefully, "Thank you, Taoist Sima, for telling me. I can't complete the ceremony, please forgive me." Sima Quan said, "You don't have to say that. You and I are on the same path, and we're in the realm beyond the realm. We should help each other. I'm here to find Taoist Yun not only to pass on this message, but also to ask for a favor. Yun Jiang said seriously, please speak, Taoist Yun. Sima Quan said, I was asked by the Taoists to find a way to get in touch with the upper echelons of the Yun Shu realm. I thought there wouldn't be any danger on this trip, but we've never had any contact before, so we need to be on guard. I'll set up a secret message with Taoist Yun. If I don't reply after a while, it means something has happened. I hope Taoist Yun can inform the inner realm in time. Yun Jiang said seriously, I won't let you down. Sima Quan said, I'll leave this two realms dial with you, Taoist Yun. He took out the dial and waited for Yun Jiang to put it away before saying, I'll leave now. Yun Jiang said, please take care, Taoist Yun. Sima Quan nodded and his figure gradually disappeared. At the same time, the possessed body had also chosen a few treasures. After bidding farewell to Zhan Mo Ping, he looked up at the sky and flew towards the place where the Azure World's door was. Chapter 1489. Sima Quan soared into the sky. Previously, when he returned to the sky, there was a light that shone down, making it difficult for him to hide his tracks. This time, he was here as an envoy, so there was no need for him to hide anymore. If he was shown on by the light, it would instead serve the purpose of alerting the other party. At this moment, above the sky, a crystal mirror was slowly rotating. A female cultivator on guard suddenly exclaimed, Pavilion Master Yun, a demon has been discovered here. Pavilion Master Yun suddenly opened her eyes and turned into a streak of golden chi. She shot down from high above and approached. Her phoenix eyes were filled with power as she asked in a serious voice, where? As she spoke, she also saw a Taoist flying toward them. Although the Taoist robe he wore was the style of Yanguang Mountain, one of the 12 forces, under the reflection of the mirror, he was shrouded by a mass of yin qi. It was obvious that the demon had taken over his body. Moreover, he did not conceal himself at all when he flew. This demon is coming toward me. The female cultivator on guard suddenly widened her eyes. These people were only responsible for supervision, so their thoughts were more meticulous than their peers. However, they did not have much battle experience. Seeing that the demon was coming toward them aggressively, they were momentarily afraid. Pavilion Master Yun said calmly, don't panic. There is the most powerful formation here in the spiritual mirror. If this demon comes, he will be seeking his own death. However, she was slightly angry in her heart. She had never seen such an arrogant demon. Usually, when a demon was discovered, they would turn and run, but she had never seen one that took the initiative to charge at them. With a flip of her wrist, a streak of golden light was sent out. Although there was a formation to protect them, out of caution, she still prepared to summon the spiritual masters of the various sects to come and capture the demon together. Not long after the spiritual message was sent out, light gradually rose. 3 formation doors in the sky opened at the same time, and at the same time, the figures of 3 elephant realm cultivators appeared. However, at the same time, the vast atmosphere instantly caused the entire spiritual mirror to shake. Many female cultivators instantly turned pale and found it difficult to breathe. Pavilion Master Yun frowned and said, can the 3 of you restrain yourselves? The junior disciples here can't withstand your aura. The 3 of them looked at each other and withdrew their chi activity. A blue-robed cultivator stepped forward and cupped his hands, saying, we rushed here as soon as we received the alarm. We thought that a great enemy had entered Lingjian, so we released the deterrents. Please forgive us, Pavilion Master Yun. Another cold-faced Taoist interrupted, we can talk about unimportant things later. Pavilion Master Yun, what happened? Pavilion leader Yun also knew that this wasn't the time to be fussing over these things. She stepped aside and said, please take a look, there's a devil heading this way. Demon? The blue-robed cultivator was slightly surprised. Then, he became furious. Since when did demons become so bold? They clearly knew that they had been discovered, but they still dared to reveal themselves like this? Did they really think that the cultivators of the Yunshu realm were easy to mess with? The three of them immediately turned into streaks of light and flew down to meet him. Pavilion Master Yun was also an Elephant Realm cultivator, but she had to guard the Ling Jian, so she couldn't leave without permission. However, it was expected that it wouldn't be difficult for 3 Elephant Realm cultivators with devil-subduing artifacts to deal with an exposed sky demon. As soon as the 3 of them arrived, they each stood at a corner and surrounded Sima Quan. In their eyes, this demon's behavior was too abnormal. They couldn't figure out what he was up to, so they were extra careful. Sima Quan met the 3's wary gazes and cupped his hands, saying, "Greetings, fellow Taoists." The blue-robed cultivator said in disdain, "Demon, don't try to show off here. Don't think that you're human just because you're wearing a human skin." Sima Quan chuckled and replied, "You don't have to be like this. My Taoist name is Quan Chi, and I'm here at the invitation of the Yunshu realm. I don't have any ill intentions. If the Yunshu realm changes its mind, I'll just turn around and leave. There's no need to make a big fuss over this and hurt our friendship." The youngest Taoist among the 3 angrily rebuked, "Nonsense. When did the Yunshu realm ever invite a demon like you to come here?" However, at this moment, the blue-robed cultivator stretched out his hand and said, "Reverend Shan, wait. Let me ask him a few questions." Reverend Shan revealed a look of disbelief and said, "Reverend Xiang, don't tell me you're listening to this demon." The blue-robed cultivator said, "There's no harm in listening. We're all here, so why should we be afraid that he'll escape?" It could be seen that the blue-robed cultivator had a lot of prestige. When Reverend Shan heard what he said, he stopped talking for the time being, but he still had a vigilant look on his face. The blue-robed cultivator looked at Sima Quan and said, "You said you were invited here. Do you have any proof?" Sima Quan said, "Of course I do." He took out the eroded text edict and said, "This is an edict created by the True One of your realm. It says that we are inviting fellow Taoists from beyond the heavens to fight against evil. I received this edict and presented it to the sect. After the True One read it, the sect sent I here to discuss an alliance with your side." The blue-robed cultivator frowned. He knew that there was such an edict, but he couldn't understand what was written on it. This was because it was clearly beyond his current cultivation realm. If what the other party said was true, and no matter what the other party's purpose was, there must be an even more profound Almighty behind him. In that case, this matter couldn't be ignored. He looked at Sima Quan with a scrutinizing gaze and said, "I can see that the person you've taken over is a cultivator from the Yunshu realm's Yanguang mountain. Since you said you were invited here, why did you take over the body of a cultivator from my realm?" Sima Quan said, "Don't worry, fellow Taoist. I'm just borrowing his body for convenience, but I can guarantee his safety. After this, I'll give him a longevity pill as compensation." The blue-robed cultivator frowned and said, "Since you came with good intentions, why did you do this?" Sima Quan said, "With my current appearance, your side is already very cautious. If I came with my real body, how would your side be willing to talk to me? I'm afraid you'll start shouting to kill me the moment you see me." The blue-robed cultivator couldn't help but ponder. At the side, Jinren Shan couldn't help but say, "Jinren Xiang, demons are used to deceiving people. Don't trust him easily." Sima Quan said, "I know you don't believe me, but I have to say this. If I want to harm your side, wouldn't it be better to hide? But I don't need to show myself to meet you. Don't you think so?" The blue-robed cultivator nodded slowly. Seeing that he was moved, Jinren Shan interrupted, "Wait. Although you claim that you're harmless to us, I'm still worried about you." Sima Quan said, "What do you want?" Jinren Shan stared at him and said, "I have a magic tool to subdue demons here. Let me imprison you so that we can be at ease." Sima Quan shook his head, "I'm an emissary. If I do that, it'll be a disgrace to the sect behind me. If you insist, I won't hesitate even if I have to fight with you here." Jinren Shan sneered and said, "Do you think I don't dare?" The cold-faced cultivator also said, "That kind of rule is for friends. Now that your identity is unknown, and you've secretly stolen my fellow Taoist's body, based on your actions, shouldn't you be on guard?" Sima Quan smiled and didn't argue with him. He knew that the other party already somewhat believed him. He just wanted to use words to suppress his spirit. He didn't really want to do anything to him. Otherwise, there would be no need to say anything and he could just make a move. If it really came to that, he could just use the bronze mask to escape. Even if he gave up this body, he could still reform it with his clone. That's enough. The blue-robed cultivator stopped the two from continuing and said to Sima Quan, Jinren Quan Xing, I can't fully believe what you've said. I'll have to report this to the higher-ups. Please wait here for a while. Sima Quan said, of course. He paused for a while and took out a jade scroll and said, I know you have doubts. This was given to me by my sex Jinren. It can prove what I've said. The blue-robed cultivator's expression was serious. He used his mana to pull it over. After looking at it for a while, he didn't see anything strange except for some indecipherable inscriptions. After thinking for a while, he took out a jade talisman and imprinted his memory on it. Then, he used his mana to activate it and sent it out. After that, he and the other person stood outside without letting their guard down, always maintaining their vigilance. However, the response came faster than they had imagined. In less than half a day, they saw a gap in the sky, and a flying raft descended. On it stood an old Taoist with a calm aura and a smile. The three of them were stunned when they saw him. They quickly bowed and said, Greetings, Jinren Ku. This Daoran seemed to have a high status. Sima Quan looked at him but couldn't see through his cultivation. He knew that this person wasn't at the mortal metamorphosis level, but he was very close. Jinren Ku looked at the scene and bowed to Sima Quan. He said with a smile, Are you Taoist Quan Ming? Sima Quan returned the bow and said, Taoist Quan Ming, I'm Taoist Quan Ming. Jinren Ku stroked his beard and said, Forgive me for being presumptuous, but do you have the body of a heavenly demon? Sima Quan said, I do have the body of a heavenly demon. However, I wasn't born like this. I cultivated it. Jinren Ku said with surprise, I see that you're clear and bright. You're no different from a normal Taoist cultivator. You actually have such a marvelous technique. It seems like the origin of your inheritance isn't simple. Sima Quan didn't say anything and just bowed. Jinren Ku smiled and didn't ask any more. He said, Taoist Quan, please get on this raft. Sima Quan agreed and got on the raft. Just now, when he stepped on the raft, the scenery in front of him changed. There were pavilions and towers, and there were mountains everywhere. They weren't illusions, and he couldn't tell what kind of technique was used. He thought to himself, Yunshu realm can control dozens of lower realms. This space illusion technique is extraordinary. If I can get it, it will be very beneficial to the 9 continents. I can try to include this condition in this negotiation. Jinren Ku said, There's still a long way to go. Taoist Quan, please follow me into the pavilion. Sima Quan gladly obeyed. After a while, the raft turned into a spiritual light and rose up. The gap in the sky also gradually closed. The blue-robed cultivator and the other two watched it go away. They felt very complicated. They knew that the situation was not good. The evil spirits were pressing on, and the few Shangjin were already trying to find their fellow Taoists from beyond the heavens. However, the person who returned was a heavenly demon. It was hard to know what the person behind him was planning. And such a force suddenly appeared in the lower realm. They didn't know whether it was good or bad. It was hard to say what the future of Yunshu realm would be like. Chapter 1490. Sima Quan followed the raft, and when he looked outside, he could only see the mountains and rivers. He had no idea where he was going or where he was going. However, he had no intention of asking about this right now, and the 9 continents had no intention of invading another's realm. In the boundless heavens, it was fate to run into people who walked the same path. Once a fight broke out, the powerful cultivators would usually fight first. People who could cultivate to this level all cherished their lives. Unless they were forced into a corner, few would be willing to do so. Like the Junqin realm, who had been hostile the moment they arrived, they had been forced into a corner. As long as there was a place to go, Kong Yin wouldn't choose to stake everything on one throw. The mountain and sea realm wasn't at that point yet. At least for the next 10,000 years, it would be safe. At that time, it was hard to say how strong the cultivators of the various sects would be. They might even be able to compete with that true yang cultivator. Daoist Ke didn't seem to be an ascetic cultivator. He was very worldly and witty. Although he had tried to test Sima Quan, most of the time, he knew when to stop, so he didn't offend Sima Quan. Sima Quan had been on the raft for a long time. Although it was dark here, it was difficult to be sure. He didn't care about that, but he was calculating the heavens. After calculating, he found that he had waited in the inner realm for a total of 5 days. He remembered that Daoran had only taken half a day to arrive, but now he hadn't. He didn't know if Daoran was doing this on purpose, but he didn't say anything. Right now, the most important thing was the Yunshu realm, so he could stay here. Every day, he would talk with Daoist Ke about the Xian Luan Dao, then he would go back to cultivate. It was no different from cultivating in his cave. A few more days passed, and Daoist Ke invited Sima Quan over. After Sima Quan sat down, he smiled and asked, "Fellow Daoist Quan Ming, do you feel any different these days?" Sima Quan's heart trembled. He didn't avoid the topic and bluntly said, "I seem to have spent a bit more time on the road." Spiritual Master Ke smiled mysteriously and said, "I'm afraid you don't know, but the time I used to travel to and fro is the same." Sima Quan couldn't help but feel a little surprised. His first reaction was that his senses had been deceived by the other party's spell, causing him to make a wrong judgment. However, he instantly realized what the other party really wanted to say. He unconsciously straightened his body, looked over, and said, "Is there a difference in time between the inner and outer realms?" Perfected Ke smiled and stroked his beard. He nodded and said, "That's right." Sima Quan was also secretly surprised, and said, "Based on the time in your world, about 10 days have passed. That means that we have been here for more than 20 days, but only 1 day has passed in the outside world." "Exactly," Kujinren said. Sima Quan praised, "Good method. If this is used for cultivation, it can create many experts in a short period of time. However, there should be some limitations, right?" Perfected Ke admitted, "Not only is there a limitation, but it's not a small one. In these 10 days, the amount of spiritual vigor used is 1,000 times more than what is normally used. Even if the spiritual vigor in the inner realms is flourishing, it can't withstand such a consumption. It's just that I'm receiving an esteemed guest, just now I'm able to activate this magical power." Sima Quan cupped his hands in greeting. This was not because he had gained much advantage over the past few days. More importantly, the other party had treated him with such courtesy. They had truly treated him as an envoy. Furthermore, through this method, the people of the Yunshu realm did not need to say anything. They had displayed their deep foundation to him. This was both a show of force and a show of respect. However, he didn't really believe the magical power that the other party mentioned. He had stayed in Junchen realm before. Even Kongying didn't have this kind of ability. If he wanted to go further, if there were really such powerful cultivators, then there was no need to ask for help. Therefore, he was more inclined to his previous judgment. There was a very powerful talisman in this Yunshu realm, which was why they could use this ability. Ke Daoran looked in a certain direction and said, "We're here." As soon as he said this, the original scenery disappeared. In its place was a high cliff with a sea of clouds. The surroundings were vast and boundless, and the spiritual vigor was incomparably clear. Sima Quan looked at it and thought to himself, "This should be the azure world. The spiritual vigor here is much higher than the ordinary realms of our mountain and sea realm. I wonder what the violet realm is like." Of course, it wasn't that the spiritual vigor of the mountain and sea realm was weaker than this realm. After all, the Yunshu realm had dozens of spiritual vigor from the lower realms. Furthermore, it had divided itself into 4 realms, and almost all of the essence was gathered in one place. Furthermore, it didn't allow the lower generation cultivators to touch it. It was far superior. When Zhang Moping met Yunjiang, he had called himself the great spiritual upper realm of the Yunshu realm. In terms of spiritual vigor, it wasn't an exaggeration. Ke Daoren said, "Fellow Taoist Quan Ming, please invite I over." Sima Quan followed him down the raft and walked along the mountain path to the temple on the cliff. Taoist Ke invited him to an immortal's cave and settled him down. He said, "I will go and make arrangements for fellow Taoists to meet the exalted true ones. I will have to trouble fellow Taoists to stay here for a few days. I know that fellow Taoist doesn't need clear spiritual qi for your cultivation, so I have to absorb some impure qi from elsewhere. However, it may not be enough. If fellow Taoist is lacking in any way, please forgive me." Sima Quan said, "Fellow Taoist, you're exaggerating. I'll just take a look at this place. It's much better than the abode I found myself. In a while, I'll release this body and let this fellow Taoist wake up." Ke Daoren waved his hand and said, "There's no need to be in such a hurry. The exalted true ones don't care about such things. Besides, there are some places in the inner realm that fellow Taoist can't enter with just his devil body alone." Sima Quan nodded and said, "Then let's do as fellow Taoist says." Old Taoist Ke smiled, cupped his hands, and walked out of the hall. When he was outside, he didn't seem to do anything, but his whole body swayed and suddenly disappeared from the air. When he reappeared, he was already standing on a cloud platform. There were 4 balls of clear light in front of him, and he could vaguely make out the silhouettes of 4 people. He stepped forward and bowed, saying, "Disciple Kupinga pays his respects to the headmaster and the 3 venerables. He came from the great might heavenly palace," so Palace Master Ming Xianling asked, "Pinga, what is this person like?" Old Taoist Ke thought for a moment and said, "The inheritance behind this person is not simple. That method of stirring the inside and outside of the world gate, and changing the time of spring and autumn, I only had to give him a hint, and he immediately understood it. Furthermore, after careful observation these few days, I did not find any similarities between him and the evil spirits. At least, he was not sent by that place." The 4 of them looked at each other. Aside from Yin Liang, the other 3 nodded. In fact, after seeing the Book of Eroding Civilization that Zhang Yan had given them, they believed that Sima Quan wasn't sent by the evil spirits. Evil spirits could read ordinary eroding runes, but the more profound they were, the more difficult it was to understand. After all, it contained a cultivator's understanding of the Grand Tao. Both sides had different paths. At first, they could understand a bit, but as they went on, they would become very different. This was one of the ways to distinguish evil spirits from spirit masters. Most importantly, Zhang Yan's eroding runes were very brilliant. Some parts of the eroding runes were very obscure and difficult to understand. This meant that the other party's cultivation was very likely higher than theirs. To be able to cultivate to such a level, there must be a huge force supporting him. Therefore, they could roughly confirm that there was no problem with his background. The dock master of Shinshio Dock, Yujirue, said, "Should we invite him here?" Yin Liang spoke at this moment, "Wait, we can wait a bit more. We must be careful and not make a rash decision. This person is a demon after all." He had been tricked not long ago, so he didn't trust Sima Quan who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Yujirue asked, "Then what does Dock Master Yin want?" Yin Liang's face darkened as he said, "Let me take a look at him and see what his past is like. If he's really from the same realm, then I'll let him come over and talk things out with him. But if he's not, wouldn't we be able to avoid a disaster?" Yujirue shook his head and said, "That's not appropriate. No matter what, this person is now an emissary. If he really is sent by someone from the same world, isn't this a provocation? If we anger this person, won't we be making a fool of ourselves?" Yin Liang said impatiently, "What realm is he at? I'm here using the ritual implement to take a look, and I'll return after a while." "So what if he can sense it?" Yujirue shook his head. It seemed that Yin Liang's heavy injuries had affected his temperament. Although he was opposed to this, there was no need to argue with him over this. Also, as Yin Liang said, using the ritual implement to take a look would only take an instant. With Taoist Kuan Yin's cultivation, even if he could sense it, he wouldn't know what had happened. Ming Xianling and Yin Xian didn't express their opinions either, clearly agreeing to this. Yin Liang flipped his hand and took out an octagonal copper plate. He guided his mana, and Sima Quan's image appeared on the plate. Of course, this wasn't the appearance of the cultivator at Mount Yanguang, but a ball of yin qi. He snorted and used his technique to take a look. Sima Quan was sitting in meditation at this moment. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong, but he didn't know what the problem was. He thought to himself that maybe the other party was spying on him. A mortal cultivator had to pay a high price to look into the past of a fellow cultivator, but he was a sky devil, and his cultivation was only similar to that of the enlightened master. It was easy for him to be looked into. But since the 9 continents dared to send him here, how could they not be prepared? He took out a concealment talisman, and was about to use it, but at this moment, the bronze mask hidden on his body suddenly shook, and the hollow eyes seemed to brighten. Inexorably, as if he was being pulled, he couldn't help but put down the talisman, pick up the mask, and put it on his face. Almost immediately, he felt a gaze from beyond the heavens, landing on him. But it was only for a moment, and that feeling quickly faded away. He thought about it, and guessed that Yunshu's realm was really looking into his background. This matter couldn't be explained clearly, but he made a note in his heart. When the time came, he would definitely try to get back at the conditions they had discussed. On the other side, Yin Liang retracted his technique, but there was a hint of suspicion in the depths of his eyes. Ming Xianling said, "Master Yin Liang, how is it?" Yin Liang composed himself, shook his head, and said nothing. He didn't know what he saw, but he thought about it carefully. Just now, the memory he saw seemed to be lost, and he couldn't find it no matter how hard he tried. What made him annoyed was that he didn't know what kind of method it was. The 3 of them looked at each other, thinking that he didn't see anything, and just didn't want to say it because of his face. Yujirue said, "Since there's no problem with this person, we don't have to wait too long. I think we can invite him here tomorrow, and we can discuss the matter of fighting against the evil monsters." Chapter 1491. After being spied on, Sima Quan was not in the mood to cultivate, so he walked out and came to a waterside pavilion. Seeing that the scenery here was elegant and there were many exotic flowers and grasses planted, he ordered a servant to serve tea. He sat down and enjoyed the tea while admiring the scenery. Suddenly, a servant came in from outside and bowed deeply to him, saying, "Daoist, there's someone outside who wants to see you." Sima Quan thought for a moment. To be able to come in contact with him at this time, it wasn't the intention of those heavenly lords, so his identity was definitely not simple. He asked, "Do you know who it is?" The servant said, "It's Shinran Yang from the Great Might Heavenly Palace, a direct disciple of the Lord of the Heavenly Palace." Sima Quan calculated and felt that there was no need to avoid arousing suspicion. Even the person who came was not afraid, so he didn't need to be concerned. He said, "Invite this Shinran in for a chat." After a while, a young Taoist with 2 loose sleeves came in. He walked elegantly and had a lazy look between his brows. This was Taoist Quan Ming. "I'm Yang Shuangyi, and I'm here to greet you." Sima Quan stood up and returned the greeting, saying, "Greetings, Shinran Yang." Yang Shuangyi noticed the tea on the table, and his eyes lit up. He walked forward and poured himself a cup. He drank a mouthful and sighed, saying, "This kind of valley tea is unique to the Purple Realm. Normally, I can't drink it even if I want to. Today, I'm basking in Taoist's glory." Sima Quan carefully observed this person. He felt that the other party gave him a very strange feeling. There was an indescribable feeling about him. He said, "Taoist, as a disciple of the Great Might Heavenly Palace and a direct disciple of the Palace Lord, could it be that you can't even drink this kind of tea?" Yang Shuangyi said, "It's true that I'm a direct disciple of the Lord of the Heavenly Palace, but I'm not necessarily someone close to him." Sima Quan extended his hand and made an inviting gesture, saying, "Please take a seat." Yang Shuangyi cupped his hands at him and sat down. Sima Quan also sat down, and waited for a servant to come up and pour tea for them. He waved his hand to dismiss the servant and said, "Since fellow Taoist has come here to see me, you must have something to tell me." Yang Shuangyi said carelessly, "First, it's for official business. I came with an imperial edict to invite you to the heavenly abode tomorrow." He then put down the teacup and said, "Next, it's for private business. I have something to tell you." Sima Quan said, "I'm all ears." Yang Shuangyi's gaze was a little complicated. He sighed and said, "Dao friend, you really shouldn't have come here." Sima Quan raised his head and looked at him. "What do you mean?" Yang Shuangyi said, "Fellow Taoist, who do you think is more powerful, the evil monster or our Yunshu realm?" Sima Quan thought for a while, and said, "On the surface, the evil monster is more powerful, and your side is only in a defensive position. However, before the few venerable ones really make a move, we can't determine the victor." Yang Shuangyi nodded and said, "That makes some sense. After all, if the few venerable ones don't make a move, we can't see the victor. However, I have to tell you, the evil monster that entered this realm is actually only an extremely small part of it. Compared to their true strength, it can be said to be insignificant." Sima Quan was not frightened by him, and instead said, "Master Yang seems to know a lot about evil monsters." Yang Shuangyi laughed lightly, and said something shocking, "How can I not know? To be honest, I am the reincarnation of that evil monster, and I know a lot about it." Hearing this, Sima Quan's expression did not change, and he said, "How can you prove it?" Yang Shuangyi had been watching his expression, and seeing his reaction, he could not help but feel very satisfied, and said, "Looks like we can continue our discussion. It's easy to prove it." He pointed at his nose. "Let me ask you, if I wasn't reincarnated, how would I know so much about evil monsters?" Sima Quan smiled. Although his words seemed to be unreasonable, after thinking about it carefully, there was some truth to it. However, this was not enough to win his trust, but he did not care about it now, because both sides just now acquaintance, there would be some things to hide. He said, "Fellow Taoist, telling me all this, are you not afraid that I will report this to your sect?" Yang Shuangyi laughed, and said, "I am not afraid that you will report me. Not only will this not benefit you, but it will also cut off a way to understand evil monsters." Sima Quan looked at him for a while, and said, "Let's believe what you said. Then why did you come to see me? Just to tell me about the power of the evil monsters, and to persuade me to leave?" Yang Shuangyi nodded, and said, "That is my intention," and then he smiled, "But I do not have such good intentions, I naturally have a purpose." Seeing that he pointed out the main topic, Sima Quan said, "Then please speak clearly, fellow Taoist." Yang Shuangyi said, "To be honest, the evil monsters actually came to this realm not only to steal spiritual opportunity, but also to find me, but I will definitely not go with them." Sima Quan's eyes moved, and said, "May I ask, why must the evil monsters come to find you?" Yang Shuangyi cupped his hands, and said, "It is not convenient to say it now, I can find an excuse, but I do not want to lie to you." Sima Quan nodded, and did not ask further. Yang Shuangyi continued, "I was originally living a good life in Yunshu realm, but I did not expect these evil monsters to come to me based on some clues from the past. It seems that Yunshu realm can no longer hold on, I need to find another place to hide." Sima Quan said, "Looks like you want the protection of the sect behind me?" Yang Shuangyi said seriously, "That is exactly what I want." Sima Quan said, "Let's not talk about whether or not the sect behind me will accept you. Why did you choose us? Is it because there is no other choice?" Yang Shuangyi nodded, and said, "Right now, there is indeed only one choice, but other than that, there is another important reason." He stared into Sima Quan's eyes, and said, "Your sect can even accept people like you, but to accept an evil monster, I think it is not a big deal." Sima Quan said in a low voice, "My sect can accept me, that is because I am a cultivator, and I have a deep understanding of demons, and even have many ways to restrain them, but I have never heard of evil monsters, and I do not know what methods they have, and where their flaws are." Yang Shuangyi leaned back, and said with a smile, "I understand what you mean. You are possessed by a demon, but you are not a demon. Although I am the reincarnation of an evil monster, I am also not an evil monster. Everything about evil monsters. If we come to an agreement, I can tell you all about it, and I also know a great secret about evil monsters, and it involves an item. If your sect can obtain it, it will definitely be of great benefit, and if I am able to join your sect, I can offer it to you. Sima Qian knew that the other party had thrown out a condition, but he could not make the decision, and still needed to report back to the inner realm, so he said, I will discuss the details with you in a few days. Yang Shuangyi obviously knew the crux of this, and said cheerfully, then I will wait for you. He threw out a talisman, and said, if you want to find me, just hold this, and I will rush over. Sima Qian received it, and looked at it, then placed it together with the bronze mask, and said, what we said today, is there a possibility of being spied on? Yang Shuangyi said, rest assured, I have a treasure on me, and I am not afraid of others spying on me. Sima Qian nodded, one more question, in your opinion, how long can Yunshu realm hold out? Yang Shuangyi revealed a mocking smile and said, that will depend on how determined those few Shangzhen are. Based on my understanding of this generation, I am afraid that before the final moment, they will abandon their disciples and flee alone, just like what they did last time. Pausing for a moment, he continued, therefore, I advise your side to be careful of this generation, do not let them take the brunt of this disaster for nothing. With that, he stood up, and cupped his hands, thank you for the good tea today. Then he waved his sleeve and left. Sima Qian watched him leave, and in his heart, he was thinking, how much of what he said was true, and how much was false. However, there were too few clues at hand, and it was difficult to determine. No matter what, after meeting the upper echelons of Yunshu realm, he could report this matter to the inner realm, and see what the exalted ones would decide. On the second day, someone came to invite Sima Qian, and he went with him. On this trip, he met the Lord of Great Might Heavenly Palace, Ming Xianling. However, exalted mortal Molt came out to show how much he valued him as an emissary, and when it came to specific matters, he naturally would not come personally, but sent his eldest disciple, Tan Jin, to discuss with him. Crossing realms to help was not a small matter, and there were many things involved, and it could not be decided in a day or two. Sima Qian and Tan Jin talked for more than a month, but the progress was rather slow. Tan Jin thought that some of his conditions were too harsh, and it was really hard to accept, but Sima Qian refused to budge. Anyway, it was not the 9 provinces who were anxious, and he believed that the other party would eventually agree. Out of caution, he did not go to find Yang Shuangyi during this period of time, and the latter did not appear again. On this day, Sima Qian talked with Tan Jin again, and seeing that there was still no conclusion, he said, fellow Tan, there are some things that even I can't decide, and you can't make the decision. How about this, I'll report this matter to the inner realm, and see what the sect decides. Please send someone to send me down to the lower realm, and I'll go get an artifact placed there, so that I can communicate with the inner realm. Tan Jin hesitated for a moment, and considering that he did not know what would happen if this went on, he agreed and said, that's fine. Does fellow Tan need someone to accompany you? Sima Qian refused, no need, I can go alone. Tan Jin said, alright, then I'll personally escort fellow Tan. Sima Qian said, thank you, fellow Tan. Tan Jin bowed to the outside, and a talisman immediately floated down. He accepted it and said, the palace master has already given me a realm-crossing talisman. Fellow Tan, please come to where I am. Sima Qian stood up and walked forward. Tan Jin waved the talisman, and the scenery in front of him changed. Sima Qian found that he had already landed in the White Realm, and was standing on top of a mountain. He bowed and said, thank you for sending me off, fellow Tan. Don't mention it. Tan Jin politely returned the greeting, and said, once fellow Tan has reached an agreement with the inner realm, you can return here, and someone will naturally come to receive you. Sima Qian nodded, then leaped up and disappeared in a gust of cold wind. Tan Jin's expression was solemn. He had thought of using Sima Qian to communicate with the artifact of this realm, and seize the opportunity to find the location of the sect behind him. However, after considering that doing so would very likely anger Sima Qian, and since Sima Qian dared to say it out loud, he must have taken precautions. The evil monster in front of him was his true enemy, and even if they could not come to an agreement, he could not make any more enemies. He sighed softly, shook his head, turned around, and fled from where he stood. Chapter 1492. After Sima Qian arrived at the small world, he saw that the bronze mask and the talisman did not respond. He knew that no one was watching him. However, since he dared to say this, he was not afraid of being investigated. Even without these two items, there was a restriction on the two realms dial. If someone spied on it, it would be broken immediately. Back then, he had left his own realm to Yunjiang in case he did not return. But now it was different. The Yunshu realm was in desperate need of support and would not harm him at this time. Doing so would only add another enemy to his side and would not bring him any other benefits. He did not go to Yunjiang this time. Instead, he planned to go to Hanwu. The latter also had a two realms dial. When Jiaohua was breached, there was a problem at the gate of two realms, causing many people to not be able to withdraw. However, in order to reclaim the realm and reclaim the spiritual opportunity, Yunshu realm opened another gate. Not only did they send two elephant deities to guard it, they also made contact with the secret warriors in the realm. Han Wu was one of the strongest people in the lower realm. When the evil monsters invaded, he hid in the forbidden formation and survived. However, at that time, he had already changed his appearance and no longer used his original identity. Due to the heavy casualties of all the countries, there was no way to find out his origin. The cultivators in Yunshu realm urgently needed someone to help them clean up the evil monsters. As long as you were not an evil monster and were willing to work for them, they could accept you. Of course, they would not let you come to the upper realm. You could exchange the evil monster's corpse for some treasures and external medicine. Sima Qian was invited by Yunjiang that day. Considering that he had to reclaim Jiaohua realm in the future, he specially came here and found Hanwu. He left a clone to monitor the movements of the realm at any time. He still wore the bronze mask, deceived the guards, and successfully passed through the gate of two realms. When he returned, he found that the spiritual opportunity was not weaker than when he came. Instead, it was more vigorous. This was because the original gate was destroyed, causing a large amount of spiritual opportunity to no longer go to Yunshu realm. It gradually returned to its original state. However, this was not a good thing. If the Yunshu realm only redistributed the spiritual vigor, then the evil spirits would plunder and pollute the spiritual vigor without restraint. In a few years, the ley lines here would dry up and the spiritual vigor would disappear. Sima Qian swept his gaze across the sky. There were many grayish-white evil monsters in the sky, each of them resembling a flying insect, clinging to the thick clouds. They had extremely long mouthparts and membranous wings on their backs. These were just the small pawns of the evil monsters, and there were all kinds of strange shapes and sizes. It was rumored that the upper echelons of evil monsters had long since lost their corporeal bodies. Wherever they wanted to go, they would possess bodies and reincarnate. The surface of the earth was barren. Not only were the evil monsters gluttonous to flesh and blood, they didn't even let the grass and trees go. Within his field of vision, all the mountains were barren, leaving only exposed mountain rocks. He sensed the location of his avatar and flew in one direction. After a day and night, he arrived before a huge rock with sharp edges. This rock was tens of thousands of feet high, but the top and bottom were one, as if they were naturally forged by the hands of heaven and earth. This was actually built by the cultivators of the Yunshu realm with great divine power, and it was used by the cultivators of the Jiahua realm as a place to hide. The people of the Yunshu realm helped them to build fortified camps with forbidden formations. Of course, they were not so kind. They just hoped that this generation could resist longer and cause more trouble for the evil monsters. Then, they could continue to collect spiritual opportunity like before. Sima Qian had an invisible body, so these outer barriers couldn't stop him. As for the inside, although there were methods to guard against demons, they were only used against ordinary demons, so it didn't affect him at all. He immediately turned into a gust of cold wind and went in. Many caves had been carved out of the giant rock, and those secret warriors were hiding in these caves. There was a hierarchy of status here as well. Those with a high cultivation base occupied a vast area, and even had their own gardens, courtyards, and pavilions, while those with low status only had a small cave to stay in. The place where Cambrian lived was very spacious. Not only did he have his own cultivation cave, but he also had 100 acres of alchemy room and medicine garden. In addition to his own cultivation level, he also had an artifact. Often, he killed more evil monsters than others, so no one dared to object to him occupying such a large area. At this moment, he was in the alchemy room refining pills. Yunjiang had taught him some methods of refining pills and setting up arrays. However, he seemed to be more talented in refining pills. All these years, he had no one to teach him, but he had found some ways to do it. Not long after, he finished refining a furnace and harvested a few big pills. Suddenly, he felt a figure appear in the distance, and immediately shouted, "Who's there?" The figure gradually appeared, and it was a Taoist with a gloomy face. When Cambrian saw him, he was surprised and said, "Mr. Sima." Sima Quan nodded and said, "Cambrian, we meet again." But Cambrian did not let down his guard, and still stood there without moving, and said, "When Mr. Sima left last time, you passed me another method to move qi, but I forgot a few words, and I want to ask a few more questions." Sima Quan laughed, and with a flick of his finger, a spiritual light entered between his eyebrows. Cambrian recognized that it was the method he learned last time, and then he was really relieved. He bowed to him and said, "Mr. Sima, please take a seat." Sima Quan sat down and said, "The evil monsters here are increasing day by day. If the people outside don't hide underground, they will be eaten clean. I'm afraid you won't have much peace here. After I finish here, I can find a way to bring you back to the sect. What do you think?" Cambrian did not agree, but said, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you, Mr. Sima. I don't want to go back so soon. In the past, when I meditated, my progress was very slow, but now that I'm fighting, my progress is faster than before, so I want to train here for a while more." Sima Quan smiled and said, "I know what you're thinking, you want to return to the sect with Yunjinren, and not be brought back by an outsider like me, right? Forget it, it's up to you." Cambrian was a little embarrassed that his thoughts were seen through, and he quickly apologized, "Mr. Sima, I didn't mean to offend you." Sima Quan waved his hand and said, "I've also been apprenticed to a master, and I've cultivated all the way, I won't blame you for this." Cambrian let out a sigh of relief. Sima Quan said at this time, "Cambrian, do you have your dual realm dial?" Cambrian replied, "Yes, I've always kept it with me, I haven't lost it, but does Mr. Sima need it?" This was something that could be used to communicate with the sect, so he would never lose it. Sima Quan said, "I need to send a message to the inner realm this time, my other one is still in the hands of your master, Yunjinren, so I need to borrow your dial." Cambrian immediately agreed, and then asked, "Is master okay?" Sima Quan said, "Very good, if you have anything to say, you can keep it for yourself, and say it to him face to face in the future." Cambrian nodded, he said to wait for a moment, and then walked out of the alchemy room. After a while, he came back with the dual realm dial, placed it on the table, and then left, giving up the alchemy room. Sima Quan walked up and examined it. This instrument had not been used for so many years, and it was full of spiritual opportunity, so he reached out and pressed it, and after a while, a spiritual light rushed out. After a while, he saw a figure appear, and he quickly bowed, "Jinren Zhang, Sima greets you." The dial he used was the one from Yunjiang. He thought he would meet Meng Zhen, but he didn't expect to meet Zhang Yan directly. Zhang Yan stood there with his hands behind his back, and said, "Jinren Sima, did you see the people from Yunshu realm?" Sima Quan said, "Yes, I did." He paused, and then reported the details of this trip to Zhang Yan, and emphasized on the matter of Yang Shuangyi. "I can't judge the authenticity of this person's words, but I don't think we can ignore it, especially his understanding of evil spirits is indeed incomparable to others." Zhang Yan thought for a while. He wasn't worried about the identity of the other party's evil spirit, whether it was sincere or not, it could be solved with a contract. However, This person said that the evil spirits that entered Yunshu realm were most likely only a small part, and this caught his attention. If this was not an exaggeration, then the power behind this person was simply unimaginable, and he needed to think carefully about what to do next. In the end, everything was still a matter of strength. If there was a true Yang Almighty in each sect of the 9 continents, then there was no need to be so cautious. It seemed that there was no solution for this matter in the short term, unless he could immediately get in touch with the patriarchs. However, just as his thoughts reached this point, his heart suddenly shook as his gaze flickered. He finally recalled something that he had not thought of before. However, the matter in front of him had to be resolved first, and he could seek confirmation later. So he suppressed his thoughts, and discussed with Sect Master Qin and the other sects, then retreated and said to Sima Quan, Jinren Sima, I have just now discussed with the other Zenrens. Your previous suggestion was not overboard. When you discuss with the Yunshu realm, there is no need to give in. If you can't come to an agreement this time, there is no need to force it. You can come back first, and we will decide again in the future. Sima Quan said, understood. Zhang Yan gave some more instructions, then he waved away the spiritual light on the dial, then turned around. The next moment, he was already in the inner hall of the Hall of Duzhen. He waved his hand, and a jade scroll slowly fell from the sky. He reached out and grabbed it. In the past, when he wanted to enter the mortal peaking shedding stage and find the root fruit, he had borrowed this secret method to look for it. However, it only recorded the 9 heavenly gates, and the rest was blank. He had cultivated the 12 heavenly gates, so it was not suitable for him. So, after he deduced the method to find the root fruit through the 12 heavenly gates with the 9 numbers true scripture, on a whim, he wrote this method in it to make up for it. However, after he finished writing it, a passage of erosion appeared and then disappeared. Because it was very complicated, he did not try to decipher it, and after that, he did not remember it. It was not until just now that he remembered this scene. He slowly opened the jade scroll, and his gaze moved to the very end. It was after his Yuan Li's handwriting, and sure enough, the row of erosion appeared again. At this moment, his cultivation was far stronger than before, so he tried to deduce it in his heart. At the moment he succeeded, there was a loud bang, and he felt as if he was suddenly in the endless primordial sea of void, and in front of him, there seemed to be someone standing, but no matter how he looked, he could not see clearly. He only felt that the person was infinitely vast, indistinct, and unfathomable, as if they were extremely far away from him, but also as if they were everywhere. Without words, he already knew who the person was. He took a deep breath, and with a solemn face, he said, Disciple Zhang Yan pays his respects to Patriarch. Chapter 1493. After Zhang Yan bowed, he felt a huge amount of memory surging into his mind. He couldn't sort it all out, so he accepted it for now. He knew that what he was seeing now should be a thought left behind by the Tai Ming Patriarch in the Jade Book. But just this alone gave him an unfathomable feeling. It was hard to imagine what level the Patriarch's cultivation had reached. Because of the difference in cultivation, they couldn't talk to each other. It was obvious that the Patriarch had expected this, which was why he made such arrangements. In his senses, after a long time, his mind regained its clarity. He realized that he was back in the hall. Just now, the scene of him arriving at the void primordial sea was still vivid in his mind. But he couldn't tell if he had really arrived there or if it was just a change in his mind. He sorted out his thoughts. The Patriarch told him that he had left something in the void space that could help the younger generation of disciples cultivate. There were people guarding the place, and if he wanted to, he could go and take it out. He didn't deliberately think about it. With just a thought, he knew clearly where the void space was and how to find it. He guessed that perhaps only by breaking through the 9 barriers and completing the subsequent methods would the Patriarch's thoughts be triggered. It was also because of this that no one had noticed the profundity of it before. But how difficult was this? Since the beginning of the Qinsang school, he was the only one who could do it. He pondered for a moment. That place was something he had to go to. Not to mention the fact that it was passed down by the Leitsang sect's founder, he couldn't ignore the item mentioned in the book that could aid in cultivation. Such an important matter, I need to inform the sect leader. He looked at the jade book in his hand and put it away. Then, he left the Duzhen Hall and went to the floating Heavenly Palace's hall. When he arrived at the door, he sent a message and was called in. When he entered the hall, he saw the sect leader. After bowing, he sat down and said, "Disciple came to see the sect leader for an important matter. Just now, I was studying in the hall and heard the message left by the patriarch." When sect leader Qin heard this, he was slightly surprised. Zhang Yan told him the process and took out the jade book. Sect leader Qin waved his horsetail whisk and said, "I have seen this past method before. Since I didn't find it, it means I'm not fated with it. Don't look at it again." Zhang Yan nodded and took it back. He said, "That thing was left by the patriarch and is extremely important. We should go and get it. But this is Qinsang School's matter. Disciple thinks that a few of us should go together, or the sect leader should go personally." Sect leader Qin slowly shook his head and said in a dignified voice, "Only Hall Master Duzhen can see the thing passed down by the patriarch. That is Hall Master Duzhen's fated chance. Only the patriarch can go there. It would be against the patriarch's wish for others to take it." He took out a seal from his sleeve and handed it over. "This is my seal. If Hall Master Duzhen can go there, you can take it with you." Zhang Yan stood up from his seat and took it with a solemn face. This was the seal of the sect leader, but the one in his hand was only a secondary seal. There were several of such seals in the sect, and the one in Qi Yuntian's hand could be used to wield authority when the sect leader was not around, but this one was used by the sect for envoys. No matter who held it in his hand, the disciples of the Yingtsang sect would feel like the sect leader had personally arrived outside the mountain gate. After putting it in his sleeve, he sat down again and said, "According to the words left by the patriarch, to go to that void space, I'm afraid it will not be a short journey. I don't know how many years it will take to go back and forth." Now that there is no definite news about Yunshu realm, disciple is ready to wait until there is a result before setting off. Sect leader Qin pondered for a moment and said, "This is not a small matter. The sooner you go, the better. I can ask the sect to prepare some things for Hall Master Zhen. If there is a more powerful evil monster standing behind Yunshu realm, it will be very difficult to deal with. If Hall Master Zhen can get the thing left by the patriarch as soon as possible, it may be beneficial to the 9 regions." Zhang Yan nodded slightly. At present, the 9 regions had Ingui, the big Kun, in charge. Even if he was not there, they would not be afraid of the cultivators of the 3rd stage of the mortal metamorphosis realm. However, if there was an evil monster that was close to true Yang or had already reached this stage, they would not be able to resist it. And he had a vague feeling that the thing left by the patriarch would not be that simple. Perhaps he could find a way to deal with such a powerful enemy. This was the power of a sect with a profound inheritance. It was also the reason why Kong Ying was so afraid of the 9 regions. Not only Qinsang School, but for sects like Shaoqing, Minghuan, and even Yun Shao, it was difficult for outsiders to know where the patriarch and the previous ascended patriarchs were, what realm they had reached, and when they would return. If they offended a powerful person, there was no need to ask what would happen. He cupped his hands and said, "In that case, I will go back to prepare." Sect leader Qin nodded and said, "If Hall Master Zhen needs anything, you can tell me. The sect will fully support you." Right when Zhang Yan activated that strand of will of the great underworld founding ancestor, countless enormous phantoms revolved around an innumerable cluster of stellar energy vortexes in the depths of the void, and they flowed like waterfalls while emitting a myriad of specks of light that rose and fell indeterminately. One could see numerous large kun that were like glass swimming freely within the sea of qi, whereas at the center of the cluster of stars was a cave constructed from crystal jade, and there was a completely round dark stone that floated in midair within it. Suddenly, the stone shook slightly. It was just a little movement, but with a buzz, it caused the countless restrictions around it to shake violently. This naturally alarmed the guards outside. After a long time, the cave mansion opened, and a white-haired Daoran stepped in. He looked around in surprise, and then went forward to check again. He could confirm that there was indeed something strange just now. He looked at the profound stone again, but it was the same as before. There was no change at all. He thought for a while and said to himself, could it be because of that? But he quickly denied this thought, or rather, he did not dare to think about it. He hesitated for a while and said, should I report to the sect leader? However, junior brother He and celestial maiden Han will be getting married in the next few days. I can't afford to make any careless mistakes at this time. Once that happens, I will have already given this item to her. No matter what happens, it has nothing to do with me. He took another look and finally decided to keep this matter a secret. He carefully retreated and closed the door of the cave. After a few days, he heard the profound sound of Zhou Kongming, shaking the entire universe. The old Taoist walked out of the cave and looked back. He was a bit emotional, but also a bit disappointed. After accepting this responsibility, I have guarded this cave for tens of thousands of years. After today, I can finally be free, and the duty of guarding the cave has come to an end in my generation. He laughed at himself. This is a good thing. Why should I be emotional? He waved his sleeve and rose into the air. He rode the wind and left the continent, heading straight for the cloud sky platform. On the sky platform, the sect leader of Mount Luo, Master Xian Hong's clone, had already descended from the sky beyond heaven. He stood on the second floor. From afar, one could only see a ball of dazzling golden light. No one could get close to him. He did not stand at the highest point because it was an empty position waiting for the patriarch's position. Below him were the 10 superior Zenrins of the sect. These powerful people stood together. Clear chi filled the sky and light covered the universe. Among these people, there was a young Taoist with extraordinary grace and elegance. He was dressed in a Xingting cave spiritual chi robe. His name was He Xianin, and he was one of the main hosts today. He was the most handsome person among the younger generation of Xian Hongtian. Ancestor Qingtong of Juyuan heaven once praised him as bright as the moon, shining brighter than the sun. This reputation was spread around the heavens and everyone knew about it. The old Taoist priest guarding the cave flew over and bowed to everyone. He also stood still. Master Xian Hong looked over and said in a pleasant voice, Jinren Wan, is the Xian item left by the patriarch safe and sound? Jinren Wan hesitated slightly and said, everything is normal. Master Xian Hong nodded. He was just asking. After all, the Xian item had been there for many years without any movement. Even if there were any changes, it would not have happened in a day or two. He said, Jinren Wan, it's hard to guard the cave. But from today onwards, you can let go of this burden. When junior brother He and goddess Han become Tao companions, Xian Hong heaven and Qi Wang heaven will be one family. In the future, the two of us will enter the gate of heaven together to answer to the patriarch. When enlightened Master Wan heard this, he hesitated for a long time. In the end, he stepped forward and cupped his hands. Sect Master, please forgive this disciple for speaking nonsense. That item was originally left behind by the patriarch for the person who obtained the opportunity. Although the deadline is approaching, it is not time yet. Should we wait a bit longer, Jinren Wan, what you said is wrong. A voice suddenly interrupted him. A handsome Taoist in his 30s with a beautiful beard that reached his chest walked out from the top of the stairs. He turned around and looked around. He said loudly on the stage, when the patriarch left this item, he said that if no one came to take it in 1,000,000 years, we, Mount Luo, could deal with it ourselves. It has been 1,000,000 years now, when have we seen the fated person? Although it will take another 1,000 years for the time to come, but even if the divine object has an owner, it should be someone like junior brother He. After cultivating for 3,000 years, he has already cut off his past and future body. Let me ask you, those scattered branches, who can compare to him? If he can't take it, who can? So, what's the harm in bringing it forward a little? His voice spread out in all directions. Not only were the people present, but even the cultivators below the stage nodded in agreement. Many of them even revealed expressions of pride. Although there were a few people of the same generation who weren't convinced by He Xiannin's abilities, he represented the Luo Mountain sect on this occasion, so they didn't hesitate to give him their praise. Taoist Master Wan sighed, bowed, and retreated. He knew that the outcome had been decided and he could not change the decision made by the sect leader and the other Taoist masters. However, he only spoke to remind them to fulfill his duty as a cave guard. Moreover, he did not believe that among the many orthodoxies passed down by the patriarch, there was anyone of the same generation who could beat this amazing junior brother he. Just at this moment, celestial music suddenly lingered in the sky. It was pleasing to the ears, and there were even streams of light in the sky, pulling the stars and trailing rainbows. The Taoist with a beautiful beard turned around and nodded with a smile. It's Goddess Han. Everyone looked up and saw a myriad of golden flowers in the sky. Silver dazzled across the sky, and a 5-cloud boat came riding on the Milky Way. On the rooftop, He Xiannin took half a step forward, his eyes filled with anticipation. This goddess Han was the daughter of the forgetful heaven lord Han Su. Her name was Han Xiaoruo. Rumor had it that with the help of her mother, she had experienced 914 reincarnations and finally became the goddess of innocence. This was equivalent to recreating the Tao of Heaven Lord Han in the past. Everyone in the heavens thought that she would be another Heaven Lord in the future. And today, this woman would become his Tao companion and study the Xian item left behind by the patriarch together. With this woman's help, he would definitely be able to understand the true gate of creation and step into the supreme gate of heaven. Chapter 1494. The boat slowly sailed to the front of the rooftop. The clouds surrounding it dispersed, and rays of light shot out from the middle, spreading out a 7-colored rainbow. After a short while, a canopy was propped up, covered by a curtain. Inside the canopy, the silhouette of a woman could be vaguely seen. Outside the canopy, there were many illusory, small, and exquisite figures of heavenly maidens, only the size of a palm, circling around her. At this moment, a voluptuous woman walked out from her side. She bowed to everyone on the rooftop and said, "Greetings to Sect Master Xian Hong and all of you. Due to Celestial Maiden Han's cultivation, she can only stay in Pauline's 7 Clouds umbrella for the time being. She can't come out to see you, please forgive her." The sect masters of Mount Luo Monastery didn't mind that Celestial Maiden Han couldn't come down. This was understandable. After a Celestial Maiden cultivated, she needed to keep her body pure and untainted. When she succeeded, she could completely discard her body and no longer have such a hindrance. Master Xian Hong didn't mention this. The bearded Taoist bowed and said, "Greetings, Taoist He. Now that the heavenly lords have not arrived yet, why don't you come down and have some tea first?" The woman surnamed He didn't respond. Her eyes turned and said, "I've long heard that Mount Luo is the direct descendant of Grandmaster Tai Ming. He once bestowed a divine item for future generations to cultivate. However, Celestial Maiden Han has never seen it before and is very curious. Since our 2 sects are getting married, why don't we take it out and have a look before the heavenly lords arrive?" The bearded Taoist frowned. This mystic stone was passed down by Grandmaster Tai Ming, so how could it be taken out for others to admire? It would soon be given out, but it would also belong to Xian Yin and Celestial Maiden Han. It wasn't something that belonged to one family. However, on second thought, Celestial Maiden Han wouldn't be so superficial as to suggest this. There must be a deeper meaning behind it. He looked back at Master Xian Hong and the latter nodded at him. He understood and turned around, saying, "Enlightened Master Wan, Celestial Maiden Han is already one of us. There's no harm in taking a look. I'll have to trouble you to take out the mystic stone left behind by Grandmaster Tai Ming." Enlightened Master Wan felt a little uncomfortable, but the sect master didn't object. He could also see that there might be a hidden meaning behind this. Hence, he bowed to the stage and said, "I'll be back soon." He stepped out of the rooftop and headed towards the cave where the dark stones were stored. Not long after, he arrived at the boundary of the earth. He passed through layers of restrictions and entered the cave. Seeing that the divine object was floating there peacefully, for some reason, he felt at ease. He bowed on the spot and went forward to pluck it down. However, he did not touch it with his Dharmakaya. Instead, he supported it with his Dharma power. Then, he carefully placed it into a glazed jade box, covered it with his sleeves, and picked it up. After successfully reaching the outside world, he flew into the sky again and returned to the rooftop. He bowed to Master Xian Hong and took out the jade box containing the profound stones. The item left behind by the patriarch is here. The bearded Taoist received it, and after asking for instructions from Master Xian Hong, he turned to the people above and said, "Before the ancestral master's gift is delivered, it must not leave Mount Luo. Goddess Han, please come down and take a look." He Xianyin said, "Senior Marshal Brother Gong, why don't I deliver it? I'll definitely get it back in a while." Taoist Gong smiled and handed the jade box to him. "This divine object will soon belong to the two of you. This should be done by Junior Marshal Brother." He Xianyin received it and said solemnly, "Even so, before the ceremony is completed, I won't let it leave my hands." Taoist Gong's expression also turned serious. Junior Marshal Brother is right. He Xianyin bowed and stepped into the void, heading towards the flying ship in the sky. Han Xiaorua had cultivated the Dahuan Wuwang heavenly maiden body. If she were to cultivate the technique with someone else, she would be able to improve her cultivation and even break through without any hindrance. If he became her Tao companion, it would not be impossible for him to completely ascend to that step. However, Qi Wang Tian would not do it for nothing. Therefore, they had to return the favor with a generous gift. Especially when Qi Wang Tian Lord Han Su requested for the divine object left behind by the great underworld patriarch. After some consideration, Master Xian Hong agreed to the request. This was because the object was shared between two people. If there were any benefits, it would be shared between the two of them. In other words, Qi Wang Tian did not get much of an advantage. He Xianyin quickly arrived before the flying ship. He was a man of etiquette and did not step onto the ship. Instead, he stood outside and held the jade box in his hand. "Goddess Han, the divine object left behind by the great underworld patriarch is here. Please take a look." He opened the jade box and revealed the profound stone that was floating in the air. He could sense that a pair of eyes were staring at him from behind the curtain. After a while, a clear and melodious voice came from the canopy. "Senior brother, can you allow me to take a closer look?" He Xianyin shook his head and said firmly, "Please forgive me, Goddess Han. This was passed down by the ancestral master. Before the ownership is decided, it is still the sect's property. I cannot make the decision." Goddess Han's voice sounded again. "What is so special about this mystical stone? Has Senior Marshal Brother comprehended it before?" He Xianyin said seriously, "I have never used the mystical stone since I started cultivating. Moreover, the ancestral master left behind a rumor that only the fated person can take it, so I have never touched it." Goddess Han said, "Senior Marshal Brother do you think you and I are the fated person?" He Xianyin smiled and revealed a hint of confidence. "Apart from you and me, who else in this world can be the fated person?" He had this confidence. In the all heavens, he had never heard of anyone in the same generation who could compare to him. Even further out, it wasn't that there weren't any geniuses that could shock the world. However, compared to them, most of the spiritual vigor and external medicines were inferior. Their techniques weren't necessarily brilliant either. This was an unfair competition. How could there be anyone who could surpass him? Goddess Han asked again, "Does this count as a violation of the ancestral master's rules?" He Xianyin faintly smiled and said, "The ancestors set the rule, if no one is fated to take it within 1,000,000 years, then it will belong to the Luo mountain sect. There is still 1,000 years left, to you and me, it is but a snap of the fingers, there is not much difference between having it or not having it." After a while, Goddess Han's voice sounded again, "Senior Marshal Brother have you asked if this divine object is willing?" He Xianyin could tell that she wasn't joking. He pondered for a moment and said, "Goddess Han wants me to ask about this divine object?" Goddess Han said, "Rumor has it that divine objects have spirits. Since it was passed down by the great underworld ancestral master and is waiting here for the fated person, perhaps it can tell by itself? He Xianin's expression became a little more serious. He vaguely guessed the reason why Goddess Han wanted to see this item. She was clearly worried about who the divine item belonged to, but it was possible. Divine items would choose their own masters, but he Xianin still believed that he was the most suitable person. He lifted up the jade box and slowly moved it towards his hand with the thought of obtaining it. Seeing that the divine object did not move, he relaxed and was about to take it down. However, at this moment, the stone suddenly turned. His expression changed greatly and he abandoned the stone and retreated. The female cultivator surnamed he also sensed that something was amiss and immediately activated all of the restrictions on the ship. With a rumbling sound, an extremely loud sound came from the heavens above, as if a hole opened up in the sky. He Xianin retreated several tens of li in one breath, and only then did he stabilize his aura. When he raised his head again, he saw that the profound stone floated in the sky for a moment, and then with a flash, it flew towards a certain direction. This sudden turn of events startled everyone. Venerable One hurriedly said, "Sect Master, the direction of the stone seems to be where it was originally placed." He then said, "Disciple will be back soon." With that, he turned into a ray of light and chased after it. Some people were worried and wanted to follow, but Master Xian Hong said, "No need. Venerable One has guarded this object for tens of thousands of years. No one knows it better than him. If he can't get it back, it's useless for you to go." On the other side, Goddess he said, "Goddess, Uncle Hua was right. There is a change in the situation, what should we do next?" Goddess Han said, "No need to say anything. Go back first." Goddess he said, "Aren't we going to greet him?" Goddess Han said, "Heavenly Lord will talk to Master Xian Hong." The cultivator surnamed he didn't hesitate and immediately passed down the order. A moment later, the flying ship began to move. It was covered in colorful clouds and returned to where it came from. When Priest Gong saw this, he turned around and looked at the rooftop. "Sect Master, this," Master Xian Hong only said, "Let them do what they want." Not long after, a ray of clear light flew over. It was Venerable Wan. He landed on the platform and bowed, saying, "Sect Master, the divine object has returned to its original cave." Master Xian Hong seemed to have expected this and wasn't surprised. He thought for a moment and asked, "Venerable Wan, has the divine object moved recently?" Venerable Wan lowered his head and bowed deeply, saying, "Forgive me, Sect Master. The divine object seemed to have moved a few days ago." Priest Gong snorted and said coldly, "Venerable Wan, if you know this, why didn't you repay it?" Venerable Wan sighed and stood there without saying anything. Master Xian Hong said, "Forget it. This has nothing to do with Venerable Wan. He also didn't want to make any mistakes during the ceremony." Someone asked in confusion, "But why is the stone like this?" Master Xian Hong pondered for a moment and said, "That fated person has appeared. The divine object sensed it and is waiting for its master, so it won't allow others to touch it." As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Someone asked, "Sect Master, where did this person come from?" Master Xian Hong said, "He should have come from beyond the heavens." Hearing this, the person said angrily, "My Mount Luo is the rightful one. The object left behind by the patriarch belongs to us, how can it be passed down to those other sects?" Venerable Wan couldn't help but sigh. Although Mount Luo Monastery claimed to be the direct descendants, in reality, all of them were just guardians of the treasure cave. Moreover, it was said that the orthodoxy passed down by the great underworld patriarch didn't differentiate between close and distant. Those sects couldn't be considered side branches either. If they really wanted to compete, they would be even more ashamed to call themselves the patriarch's descendants. However, they landed here and had frequent dealings with the heavens. Moreover, they were powerful, so outsiders thought that the most orthodox lineage under the great underworld patriarch was Xian Hong Heaven's Mount Luo Monastery. As time went by, even they themselves thought so. Master Xian Hong looked over and saw that he Xianin was already at the bottom of the stairs. He said slowly, Xianin, what do you think? Xianin's face was calm. He bowed and said, Xianin didn't have the help of the divine object before, so I still cultivated to become immortal. Having the divine object is good, but without it, I'm still me, nothing has changed. Master Xian Hong nodded. Very good. Unrestrained by external things, unfettered by the heart, that's how cultivators should be. The patriarch's inheritance should be obtained by those who are fated. Since you're not the fated one, there's no need to be greedy. Xianin bowed and said yes. In fact, at the beginning, he was also a little embarrassed. After all, just now, he had boasted in front of his Tao companion, but was exposed in the blink of an eye. Anyone would feel embarrassed. However, he had cultivated for so long, and his temperament was not comparable to ordinary people. After sorting out his thoughts, his heart was calm. Since the person who obtained the fate law was someone from beyond this world, it was only a matter of time before he came to Xianhong heaven. However, the ancestor did not say that he would protect this person back then. This place was outside of the upper world and was filled with danger. It was normal for something to happen to this person. If that was the case, this item would still fall into his hands in the end. To be continued. Chapter 1495. In the mountain and sea realm, in the green sky hall, Zhang Yan stood on a branch of a towering tree, looking at the scenery around him through the sea of clouds. This tree seed was obtained from the Tai Hao sect. After it was planted here, it had been irrigated by vigorous spiritual vigor for hundreds of years. Now, it was tall and majestic. Its branches were strong and sturdy. A large piece of plain below was covered by its crown and leaves. Due to the fact that the tree was extremely large and constantly exhaled clear spiritual energy, the demonic cultivators who had cultivated here were able to see the benefits of this place and decided to build a palace for Zhang Yan. Thus, they commanded numerous spirit birds and beasts to build temples and halls on the tree. After several hundred years, this place had become a magnificent palace with over 100 large and small palaces. It should be known that this place was different from the Palace of Purity Truth. This was a place that belonged to Zhang Yan alone. All the demons here who had developed spiritual intelligence were his servants and vassals in name. And after he arrived, he usually stayed in the palace of Xing Chen, which was located at the highest point of the tree. The Green Sky Hall was supported by the heaven and earth fetus that he obtained from the original dragon residence. Over the years, it had nurtured many spirit mountains and beautiful rivers, and it had already formed a small world of its own. It did not need to be fed by the outside world. In the past year, he had used his power to move the entire Green Sky Hall to the depths of the void sky, and collected the purple clear spiritual energy from outside. Soon, he would go out to find the opportunity left behind by the great underworld patriarch, and there was no purple clear spiritual energy in the void sea, so he had to prepare in advance, and the more the better. However, no matter how one looked at it, the most suitable thing to carry was undoubtedly the Zicheng Great Medicine. Fortunately, he didn't need to worry about this. Under sect leader Qin's orders, the offerings from Jun Chen realm were all refined into great medicine and sent to the true purification hall. He didn't stand on ceremony and accepted all of them. Although this time he was looking for an opportunity for himself, if he succeeded, he could also protect the sect. Suddenly, he heard the cries of cranes coming from the sky. He looked over and saw 2 red-crowned cranes with clean feathers and bright red heads appear on the top of the clouds. They circled around and landed on his left and right side. They moved closer to him and revealed an affectionate look. Zhang Yan smiled faintly, stretched out his finger, and wrote a shallow inscription in the air, letting him comprehend it. Although these 2 cranes had gained intelligence, they had yet to take human form. However, under his guidance these few days, they could already understand some of the ways of cultivation. Not long after, many birds flew over, all of them hovering around him, letting out sweet bird cries. This time, he didn't make a move. Instead, he ordered the maidservant beside him to toss out some fragmented spirit pills for it to eat. Over the past year, he had transformed these birds with the Nianjue. Although it had only been a short period of time, more than 100 strange beasts had gained intelligence. He didn't plan to leave these demonic beasts in the mountain and sea realm. Instead, he planned to take them all with him, and use them as servants on the road. That way, he wouldn't have to do everything himself. He glanced over, and couldn't help but reveal a look of interest. Among the flock of birds, there was a little green bird that hadn't been transformed by the Nianjue. At the moment, it was in the midst of the flock, pecking at the medicinal pills. All of the demonic birds here were recorded, but because they were so inconspicuous and nimble, and because they often hid behind larger birds, the maidservants who were feeding them hadn't noticed them. He smiled faintly. This little green bird had clearly gained intelligence, and seemed to be very clever. After thinking for a moment, he said to one of the maidservants, "If this bird comes again in the future, don't drive it away." The maidservant realized that she had made a mistake, and was a bit frightened. "Yes, master," she said, "I'll take good care of it." Zhang Yan shook his head and smiled. "There's no need to take good care of it, and there's no need to expose it. Just let it be, and see how far it can go in the future." At his level of cultivation, he would pay extra attention to every single person or thing that appeared before him. He could faintly sense that he would have a series of interactions with them in the future, and it would develop into various fortuitous encounters and karma. For example, this green bird in front of him. In the blink of an eye, he was able to divine all the possible changes that could occur in the future. If he deliberately avoided it, he could sever all interactions between them, and in the future, they would no longer be connected. Now, he chose to keep it. He wanted to see whether or not the future would be the same as what he had predicted, and what kind of changes would occur in the future. However, this was also because the green bird was so lowly that it wasn't even worth mentioning in front of him. It wouldn't be able to cause any major changes in karma, so he decided to give it a try. If it were any other cultivator, things wouldn't be so simple. By the same logic, if it were someone with greater strength than him and had come into contact with him, then if they were in the same space, then perhaps that person would be able to deduce his whereabouts. Of course, this would definitely not be easy, and it wouldn't be easy to accomplish. One would surely have to pay an extremely great price. On the other hand, the person that completely severed the past and future might be able to escape from being spied on like this. After these demon birds finished consuming the medicinal pills, they let out joyful cries before leaving the large branch and flying back to their nests. They were making the best use of this opportunity to refine the medicinal strength of the medicinal pills. Zhang Yan looked at the little green bird that flew into the distance, and he pondered in his heart. If I call it back at this moment and pass down a profound technique to it, then what would happen? But as soon as this thought arose, he immediately felt many changes occur behind him, and then he extinguished this thought. Everything became clean once more, as if all the messy branches and vines had been severed, and for a time, he faintly comprehended something in his heart. As he was pondering here, a cloud of mist came from afar and landed in front of him. As the mist dispersed, a green-clothed woman with wings on her back appeared. She seemed to be of a different species. She came forward and kowtowed, then took out a letter from her pouch, raised it high, and said, "Master, Steward Jing has sent a letter. Would you like to take a look, Master?" Zhang Yan focused his gaze, and the letter flew up and landed in his hand. He opened it and saw that it was about the Yunshu realm. As he was going to travel far soon, he paid special attention to this realm. Now that the initial discussion with the Yunshu realm had been reached, not long ago, the Junqin realm had dispatched 15 perfected lords. Of course, this number would be increased or decreased according to the changes in the battle situation. Based on the current situation, the strength of this support was not small. Because most of the spiritual opportunity of the Yunshu realm had to be provided to that person, its own strength could not be fully expanded. Although it looked huge, it was actually not very sturdy. It was like an inflated bag that was empty inside. When it was poked from the outside, it would leak. First of all, there was a lack of manpower, which directly caused this generation to be stretched thin. They could only take care of one thing, but not the other. Often, when they knew that a certain lower realm was attacked, they could not mobilize enough manpower to help. And with the addition of more than 10 Grotto Heaven level cultivators, the situation was immediately stabilized. Even 3 lower realms were recovered, but that was all. Because if they continued to exert more strength, they would still face the same situation as before, unless they could mobilize more manpower from the Junqin realm. However, if the evil monsters were really as powerful as what Yang Shuangyi said, they would not retreat so easily, and there would definitely be another fierce battle. Also, due to the contact between the 2 realms, a lot of news could not be hidden, and the existence of that person was gradually known by the 9 continents. Among them, the news from Yang Shuangyi was the most detailed. It was said that the treasure was originally floating in the void primordial sea. Back then, the sect ancestors of these cultivators from the Yunshu realm found it by accident. When they found that this treasure had the ability to land in the delimitation pass and divide the spiritual opportunity, they brought it back in ecstasy. However, the divine treasure had a spirit. After they arranged everything, they realized that they could not leave this person, so they could only compromise for the time being. At that time, the forces of these sects in the Yunshu realm were far stronger than they were now, so they were also looking for ways to restrain this person. However, before they could really succeed, the evil monsters came to them. After a great battle between both sides, these cultivators were defeated, and the remaining people withdrew with this treasure. In the end, they reached the Yunshu realm, and under its guidance, they opened up many lower realms and established a foothold until now. Zhang Yan looked at it and felt that the incident of the evil monster's arrival must have had something to do with this treasure. He thought to himself, looks like this person is not in control of his master, we need to be more cautious. He could see that, and he believed that the sect master could also make the correct judgment, so he did not make any further suggestions. As long as he could get the opportunity left by the patriarch, he believed that there would be a way to solve all these problems. After skimming over this matter, there were still some details written in the letter. After reading all of them, he returned to the hall to cultivate. Although it was better to set off as early as possible, he still needed to be fully prepared, especially with a suitable vehicle. Although the palace flying ships from before were not bad, after the 9 continents obtained the secret books of Junqin realm, and combined with the original method of Butian Pavilion, their sacrificial refining method had greatly improved. Therefore, Baoyang Courtyard and Fangchen Courtyard had already prepared to work together to build a ship for him to fly across the void sea of essence. According to the current progress, it would be completed in about 2 years. As for the magic treasure that was being refined in the Xianyuan Small World's earthly fire heavenly cauldron, after some consideration, he decided to temporarily leave this world here, and leave the subsequent sacrificial refining to Mountain River Child and the 5 heavenly Grotto Heaven disciples. After all, he had already started, and every step was guided by Butian Pavilion, so he only needed to do it step by step. The power of these disciples was enough to just look after it. Also, sacrificial refining such a treasure required a long period of time. It was possible that when he came back, the sacrificial refining would not be completed. Without the Xianyuan Small World, it seemed like he had lost a way to retreat, but for those who cultivated to mortal metamorphosis, logically speaking, there was no limit to the number of small worlds that could be opened. He could open another one when he reached another world. This time, he did not plan to directly go to the world pointed out by the patriarch. Instead, he planned to first go to the world where he sensed the Tao root fruit of strength, so that his cultivation of strength would be complete. In his opinion, the great underworld patriarch definitely had his own considerations when he placed the item there, and let the younger generation disciples take it. This part of the journey would not be simple, and it might even be a test. Therefore, the higher his strength, the better. Only then would he be able to deal with all kinds of dangerous situations. To be continued. 8.